Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I wish Kalis was coming on to the show. I would love to have a conversation with her. You never know. Behind the scenes, she may be, brilliant. She just can't necessarily show it when she's on camera. But I'm glad that you guys can join me. I hope you guys have had a fantastic night. I don't want to be a chauvinist in regards to location. So, what fantastic day to depend upon where you are in the world. I had a guest who canceled at the very last minute. Hopefully, we will get him back on next week. I've had conversations with a few people, actually. Vanessa Beeley, not Kalis, Vanessa Beeley. So she's going to be on the show tomorrow. I touched base with her earlier today on something that she put on social media. So we will speak tomorrow. It's been a while since I've spoken to her, so it should be good to catch up. Also, Ajamu Baraka, he is going to be on the show next week. And it's funny when you talk to people that you don't know and you meet them for the first time. Sometimes the personality catches you off guard just because you see them at a distance, not as individuals. Maloof was that way. When you're talking to Maloof, he has a certain personality about him. Ajamu made the point, he was like, I watch your show all the time, and I can't believe it's taking you this long to reach out to me. Black folks also do foreign policy. And I was thinking as I was reading this, dude, I have tried to reach out to you in the past. But no, it should be great to have him on. It should be great to have him on. It was a little while ago since I tried to reach out to him. And for whatever particular reason, I couldn't necessarily find this information, but I found it. I hit him up. He says, yes. There's another gentleman that I want to bring on. He is an African analyst, and he should be damn good also. So next week should be a pretty stacked week. Look, I will tell you, doing the show, getting guests and everything else, it's kind of like life. There are parts of life where you try to make gains. There are other parts of life where you just try to bear it and hold the line. Meaning there's some weeks where you try to hold the line and other weeks where you make gains. Next week should be a damn good week in regards to the guests that are coming on the show. So, and that says nothing about the guests this week. They were fine. I'm just saying that some weeks are harder than others to get your schedule. Second thing on the list, I need to give an apology to Dimitri. No, I had no idea that the conversation was going to go in that direction. And yes, I was pretty heated at Daniel over that. For one, look, I would say this. I don't know what's in KJ's mind. I don't understand that situation. I just fundamentally don't understand it. When Dimitri was on the show the first time around and KJ attacked him, Dimitri had said nothing overtly outrageous. It was very innocuous. And so KJ's response was mystifying to me, and it still is, frankly. Daniel is being straightforward. I just don't like the way he went about it. And meaning he's an honest actor in regards to what he's saying. Him and I've had fights. Well, not fights, but we've had arguments over the whole Israel thing in the past. And so he's a true believer in regards to what he's saying about Hamas. I don't care if you disagree with my guests. Disagree to your heart's content. Don't attack my guests. It is a pet peeve of mine. And so, yeah, my response to that was pretty aggressive. Don't call my guests foolish, especially when the guest just left and you are just coming on the show and you don't know that guy. And so I've spoken to Dimitri about it. I've spoken to Daniel about it to kind of nail down, don't do that. He apologized. He said he went too far. He didn't mean it in those terms. The world is great. Everybody's fine. So there is that. The other thing I want to get to is a tale of three men. And I guess I'll cut this as a thing. What time is it? Do we have time? Daniel is not a nobody. He's not a nobody. I don't want you to attack my guests. Meaning I would defend Daniel every bit as much as I would defend any other guests. I just take great issue with him going after it. In fact, I was less interested in the argument with the Hamas thing, and I was more bothered. Like I was more into the thing of, dude, don't do that, if that makes sense. But he apologized. And so everything is fine. I saw an email from Dimitri. I need to respond to the email further, but Dimitri was like, don't apologize. It's not your fault. Yeah, but it's my show. And if the person is on my show, it's the issue. I feel like over the course of my life, almost as a rule, almost as it was mandated by God or something, I end up on both sides of issues, meaning things that I've done, I usually get back. Or things that I've experienced with somebody else, I usually get the other side of it. Meaning whether it was positive or negative, I usually get both sides of the issue. I feel like this is reality biting me in the ass. It's slightly different, but still, it's similar enough, it rhymes enough where it feels like it's biting me in the ass. When I had my issue with Ritter, and it's not just my issue, it was the audience issue also. I know a lot of that, some people put that directly on me, but I would point out to the audience that part and parcel to the reason that Ritter stopped coming on the show, I strongly suspect, is because the last interview I did with Ritter, there were like 1,000 comments, all of them negative. What happened to Ritter? What the F was Ritter talking about, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The audience went after him pretty heavily. I went after him specifically on the issue of Iran, because for all intents and purposes, it felt like somebody was in the alt media area, especially somebody like Ritter, who's big in this area, is saying stuff that would have fit firmly in the mouth of John Bolton. That bugged the hell out of me, especially him being a member of coming on my show a lot. My issue, though, was specific to what he was saying. I never attacked him directly. I'm trying to nail that down. After I did the video, because I was greatly annoyed with the stuff that he was saying about, America's America, Iran is Iran, so Iran needs to effectively just bow down and take it in the ass. I ended up going on Garland's show. I did not know that Garland and Ritter were friends. I didn't know that. I knew that he would come on the show every so often, but he would go on a lot of people's shows, but I didn't know they were connected. And I think I was still grumbling over the stuff that he was saying on Glenn Deason's show, etc. It was after the fact where I realized, oh, they have a relationship. I didn't know that. That was my bad on that. By the same token, though, I never went after him directly. It was always specific to the issue. And frankly, I wouldn't have had issue with KJ or Daniel going after the issue, the point. Meaning, if you disagree with something somebody said, I don't really care. This show has all sorts of disagreements. I disagree with most of the people who come on the show in some particular fashion. I think it just makes an interesting show. The idea that you just sit there and let somebody just rattle off and you don't contest it just seems weird to me. I would not take issue with that. So I'm being consistent in that sense. But I feel like it rhymes enough where it's like, what the fuck? And again, the KJ thing, I don't get. I fundamentally don't get the KJ thing. Daniel, I do get, because Daniel, he's being straight in regards to what he disagrees with. What I take issue with is calling him, I guess, foolish. Or what I take issue with is KJ going on and looking up Dimitri's information and then using it to attack Dimitri, as opposed to actually just dealing with the point that Dimitri made, which wasn't wrong, by the way. China is giving Israel a huge amount of stuff. I mean, China's the #1 trading partner with Israel, with the exception, especially if you take out Europe as in totality, meaning if you break up Europe into individual parts, China is the #1. So Dimitri pointing that out is not a negative, nor is that a reason or rationale to kind of lose your shit and go ballistic over that. So no, I don't get that part. That was atypical of KJ. That was out of his character. I don't get it. I still don't get it. I don't understand it. And if he doesn't understand why that's a negative, a bad thing to go directly after somebody, then that's on him. As for yeah, dude, bad timing. As for yeah, I feel like it's a weird allegory between the two, even though it's not exactly right. I don't take issue with a guest going after what another guest says. It's just life. That's interesting. In fact, you can always bring the two on the show to have a conversation about it. But the moment that you attack somebody, you've injected a I don't want to call the mean-spiritedness into it, but the person is obviously going to feel some kind of way about it, which makes it very difficult for the people to have a conversation at all. So I've spoken to everybody. Everybody is on the same page, and everybody is fine. And yes, I was a bit aggressive in that because A, the KJ thing had just happened, and B, Dimitri is a good friend of the show. I like him personally as an individual, and I don't want you hitting somebody who I like individually. So again, I don't take issue with arguing the issue. I take issue with attacking the individual, if that makes sense. There's a difference in those things. But that's all of that's done. Everything's good. Let's get to the actual show. What time is it? Do I have time? Yeah, I have time. I would like to talk about a tale of three men. A tale of three men. All of these men are doing something very similar, but all of them are doing something also very different. And the way it's being interpreted and the way it's being conveyed in regards to just visually looking at it, the perusal of it all, it's tonally different and somewhat strange. Trump, Lavrov, and Putin. Trump, Lavrov, and Putin. It came out by the Financial Times. And again, you didn't take the Financial Times, or you didn't need the Financial Times to say this. It was kind of obvious that the United States was directing an air campaign against Russian energy sites. Now, one day after the next, you would see Russian energy sites continuously get hit over and over and over. Now, this is also in conjunction with Donald Trump trying to get India to stop using Russian oil, trying to get Europe to stop using Russian oil, something they were never going to do. And of course, wanting to pressure China and other countries also. This obviously failed on the diplomatic sense. In Europe, India, and China, everybody told Trump to go pound sand. So the other aspect to that was the kinetic part, which was effectively directing Ukraine to hit energy sites. All right, that was something that he was literally doing. Now, as I pointed out before, the obvious reason that Donald Trump is doing this is because he has no cards. He has no leverage. And because he has no leverage, he's stuck in a position of weakness in any kind of negotiation or any conversation he has with Putin. Ultimately, Putin continues on the battlefield, continues to make their gains. Ukraine continues the manpower shortages and weapon shortages and everything else, meaning they are in a massive cauldron in various parts of Ukraine, where Donbass will most likely fall within a year, maybe even several months, especially if there's a collapse in the military sense. It is obvious. It's just blatantly obvious. Anything that is being legit that you read on this, that is going into the military circles, meaning what's happening on the ground, makes it very clear that in main areas of Donbass, Ukraine is getting routed. So, if that is your situation on the ground militarily, then what do? You have no leverage. So in Trump's mind, I'm going to go after the oil. I'm going to go after their energy. If I can damage their capability of doing energy, then maybe I can get them to come to the table where I have some level of, let's say, weight in the negotiations, where I have some level of cards that I can play to put more lipstick on this particular pig, to deal from a position of strength, because that's what the U.S. wants to do, because the U.S. is a hegemon, and hubris compels behavior. That hasn't worked. And when Russia has finally decided to step up their campaign on the energy of Ukraine, 50, 60% of the ability for Ukraine to do oil and gas up in smoke, eliminated. You get Zelensky screaming bloody murder, saying there needs to be some kind of ceasefire in the air, and is begging Daddy Trump to effectively help him effectuate that. Now, when everybody was saying, oh my God, Russia's getting hit in the gas thing, they thought it was great. When Russia asserts itself in regards to the energy and the infrastructure of Ukraine, of course, everyone screams. Because at the end of the day, Russia has the whip hand in that process. It doesn't work. It didn't work. There's that. But what's interesting, what's important in that is that the Trump administration, who's pretending to be a negotiator and is claiming that this is not his war, it's Biden's war, is directing a military campaign against Russia. That is the point. that matters. All right, so that hasn't necessarily worked. So Donald Trump brings up this notion of Tomahawk missiles. Now, the Financial Times is reporting that the U.S. only has about 50 Tomahawk missiles that it can give Ukraine. This is obviously not enough to change the context on the battlefield. And there's this question of, as Putin pointed out, this will be the United States attacking Russia with these missiles. Now, the first time around, when this was brought up under the Biden administration, Putin's response was somewhat hyperbolic, and it scared Joe Biden enough, but Joe Biden sat there and refused to give those missiles. This time around, Putin's response is far more muted. It's far more muted. And Russia continues its deferential nature towards the United States. This is despite the fact that the United States is running an oil war against Russia. There's that. And this is also despite the fact that the United States is talking about firing directly missiles at Russia. Financial Times reports that the U.S. has already picked out its targets and that the missiles can be sent to Ukraine rather quickly. There is no talk about training the Ukrainians in using these missiles. What they're talking about doing is sending mercenaries or contractors. And again, mercenaries, contractors, U.S. soldiers. How do you know that these aren't U.S. soldiers pretending to be contractors, just like there are mercenaries in Ukraine that are most likely soldiers pretending to be mercenaries? In either case, it doesn't really matter. For all intents and purposes, this is the United States directing, picking targets, and firing at those targets at Russia directly. You've broken a taboo. Now, the U.S. is in Ukraine because it would take, again, those contractors coming from the U.S. to be able to fire those missiles at Russia. That's a big deal. It's also secondary a big deal and somewhat of a problem because, as I pointed out before, the first time this came up, Putin made the point of saying this will be a massive escalation and this will be the United States attacking Russia because it takes the U.S. hands in order to do it. Now, I suspect that two things were taking place when Donald Trump brought this up. A, it was a bluff and a threat in one part. And B, it was a trial balloon. The trial balloon, or the bluff and the threat part, is obvious. It is a man searching for relevance and searching for some level of capability to create some level of strength in some kind of talk, negotiation, etc. From the standpoint of the trial balloon, the entire point of the trial balloon part was, how does Russia respond to us bringing this up? What do they do? What do they say? Are they being hyperbolic about it? Are they saying they're going to hit targets in Europe? What are they going to do? And of course, with this conversation being talked about for about 2 weeks, what you got was Putin continuing to be deferential. Now, yes, they said it would change the relationship in regards to the US and Russia, and this would be an escalation. But again, deferential and pragmatic. So I strongly suspect that the choice has already been made to give these missiles to Ukraine. And they probably have already picked out the targets. And whether it's 20 missiles or whether it's 50 missiles, those missiles will create a context by which the United States is directly in Ukraine and the United States is directly creating a norm and firing missiles at Russia. There's that. The other part to that also is this is crossing a red line that was established by Russia and was established by Putin, effectively saying, look, this is you attacking us. Just be aware, this is you attacking us. Well, they're crossing that line because from their point of view, Putin has been deferential the entire way through. Putin has been a consummate diplomat all the way through. Putin has effectively been pragmatic all the way through. And so if you're the US and you're looking at this, you're saying to yourself, what is Russia going to do? They're probably going to attack Ukraine more, but they're already attacking Ukraine. So what does that matter? And they're probably going to be very angry, put out threats and everything else. But that is most likely going to be the extent of Russia's action. Putin will remain pragmatic. And because Putin will remain pragmatic, we're okay in doing this. I understand that some people have this belief, and a lot of people have this belief, that this pragmatism is a good thing. And on some level, the pragmatism is. But pragmatism, like anything else, really depends upon who you're dealing with. I had two aunts in my life. Well, I had my mom and my aunt. My mom will give the shirt off her back, nicest person in the world, has a tendency to get walked on because of that. And so when you're dealing with her, you have to deal with her in that context of creating a balance. No, I am not going to allow you to do this because this is not in your best interest. Meaning you have to be aware of who you're dealing with. With my other aunt, you have to fight for everything. You have to know who you're dealing with. Now, if you are dealing with somebody who's pragmatic and dealing with somebody who's an honest actor, then your pragmatism will be honored and accepted as pragmatism. You're not dealing with that. You're dealing with people who are sociopaths, who overthrew a government in order to get to launch, or at the very least, create a huge military on your border, knowing full well that it was going to incite and start a war. You're dealing with people that have effectively killed, 100, 200,000 Russians, not to mention the 1.5 million Ukrainians that are dead right now. I'm saying you're dealing with monsters. You're dealing with people that attacked Venezuela, that is literally murdering Venezuelan fishermen, that kill how many in Iraq, how many in Afghanistan, how many in Syria. You're dealing with people who are working right now with a dictator. And yes, not a dictator, a head chopper. And yes, I know that Putin was working with the head chopper also when he's in Moscow now, but I'm pointing out that it was the West's head chopper that they've installed in Syria and have turned a blind eye as that head chopper that they effectively back and installed is out there murdering ethnic minorities as we speak. You're dealing with monsters, is the point that I'm trying to make. The pragmatism has only been seen as weakness. And in this very specific case with the Tomahawk missiles, that again, most likely will end up in Ukraine, will most likely be fired at Russia with US hands, US targeting, being in charge of it. And you still get a deferential Russia. The other part and problem to this is that deference gets across something. It gets across a power dynamic and a differential and power dynamic. What I mean by that is I understand that there are other actors around the globe that Russia wants to get across that, look, we are open to negotiations. We are being the ones that are pragmatic. Those are being the monsters. Those are being the ones that are escalating the conflict and everything else. Okay, fair enough. That's true. But what does it matter in the real sense of the word? And if indeed what this ends up being is the US firing missiles into Russia, blowing past a red line, what does it tell Europe? And what does it tell the United States? It says Putin is bluffing. We can put troops in Ukraine. Putin is bluffing. He was bluffing about this particular red line. This was a big deal, right? This is a taboo being broken. This is the United States and Europe firing missiles directly at Russia with their own hands in doing so. And Putin remained pragmatic. I'm saying there is something that you lose in the process of being pragmatic if the people who you're dealing with that are monsters don't ultimately believe you're serious. And while it is true that you will push into a point where Russia will respond, I'm saying that maybe you didn't need to get to the point of getting to that extreme response if indeed you were more serious, more aggressive in the interim. I am not asking Russia to start a third world war. That's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to point out that if your enemies and opponents don't believe you're serious, then you may end up in that third world war as a direct result of them stepping over a boundary that you told them was a boundary, but they didn't believe was a boundary because up to that point, you effectively allowed them to blow your red lines. So this is what the US is doing. This is what the Trump administration is doing. Zelensky is apparently going to the White House on Friday. That conversation is going to take place. I don't believe for a moment that conversation or that decision has not been made. And the Financial Times reporting on it is probably correct. Now, you can make the argument that that's just a threat. Maybe. But what is the downside for the United States in this case? If indeed Russia continues to fire, or the US fires missiles into Russia, what has Russia's response been? Well, these are old missiles. These are old missiles. And we know how to deal with attack items. And maybe one or two get through. I mean, we know how to deal with tomahawks. So maybe a few get through, but all things being equal, meaning the response that was there when Biden pointed this out has now been moved to, well, these are 80-year-old missiles. These are from the 80s. It's okay. We can deal with that. We're not going to change anything. We're just going to keep the pace. I'm pointing out that is moved. That's a line that is moved. And that will be interpreted as they're bluffing and they're not being serious. Mark my words. I could be wrong. I always point out I could be wrong. Don't mistake incoherent for true. Simultaneously, and right beside it, Lavrov gave a press conference. As the U.S. talks about killing Russians, listen to what Lavrov is saying. Russia believes the Alaska process is not over. Russia believes the Alaska process is not over. United States President Donald Trump's statement about potential supplies of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine have nothing to do with the discussions of the Ukrainian settlement, which took place during the Russian-U.S. summit in Alaska, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said. Quote, its statements on possible Tomahawk missile supplied is not a response to the concept which was discussed in Alaska. None of his statements regarding Tomahawks have anything to do with what was conceptually discussed in Alaska. Or, I would rather say, conceptually and practically, unquote, Lavrov said in an interview with Kommersant newspaper. Let's keep going. Russian President Vladimir Putin brought to Alaska, quote, a response to the proposals delivered by U.S. Special Presidential Envoy Steve Witkoff to Moscow a couple of weeks before, unquote. He said the Russian president, quote, took some time for considerations at that end and said in Alaska that he's ready to agree with the concept with Witkoff brought because it reflects the understanding of the root causes in the first place and is aimed at eliminating them, unquote. In fact, he explained how the concept could be realized after its adoption. So just to be clear, this is Lavrov saying, look, I know they're talking about firing Tomahawks at us, but the Alaska process hasn't been extinguished. And what we discussed in Alaska has nothing to do with this talk of Tomahawk missiles. These things are separate concerns. Witkoff brought a message to us about dealing with the root causes of the war. We agreed with Witkoff's proposal, and we also gave some kind of point of view in regards to how we maneuver this, how we get to where we need to get to. Now, let's keep going. I want to go with this because it is super interesting that these two things are taking place side by side. The U.S. is talking about imparting cost on Russia, where Lavrov is saying the Alaska summit is still at work. The U.S. is attacking oil fields, literally, real physical objects being destroyed, with the U.S. pointing out how to do it. Lavrov is saying the Alaska summit process is still in operation. Let's keep going. So Lavrov continues. He says, following the talks in Alaska, Trump went on to consult, as he said, allies in Washington, then in turn, trying to convince U.S. President, following the talks in Alaska, Trump went on to, quote, to consult, as he said, with his allies in Washington, unquote. Then in turn, quote, are trying to convince, unquote, U.S. President that it is not Vladimir Zelensky and Europe who are making fools of them, but rather Russian President Vladimir Putin does not want peace. Effectively, Donald Trump went to Europe. This is put very weirdly. Donald Trump went to Europe. Europeans came to Washington. The Europeans are effectively saying, look, Putin is making a fool out of you. He doesn't want peace. And that's what they're trying to convince Trump of. Quote, yes, Trump is under pressure, Lavrov said. And now Trump administration understands the need to look into the root cause and is trying to do it, unquote. This is what Lavrov is saying. Lavrov continues, quote, we're still waiting for specific response to the results of the talks in Alaska. We're loyal to them, unquote, Lavrov said. Moscow will keep an eye on how things are going in Washington and how the United States president and his team responds to ultimatums of Kiev and certain Western leaders regarding the conflict settlement, demanding that they, Trump and his team, change their inner feelings and intuitive approach to Ukraine and openly take a position promoted by most of the rabid Russophobic Europeans. Quote, we presume that mutual understanding was conceptually reached there in Alaska. The parties also discussed how this understanding could be transformed into practical actions on the ground. We clearly outlined how we see it. President Trump said that he needs to consult with his allies. The consultation process is apparently continuing, unquote. This is Lavrov's statement. This is Lavrov's statement. I don't believe for a moment, at least God, I hope not, that Lavrov believes even 10% of what he said in that statement. Meaning in the same way that Donald Trump is putting on this show of bluster and power and strength while being a weak man who can't entirely make a decision, and not just entirely can't make a decision, has no cards in this process, which is why I'm going to say he's weak in this process. Lavrov is effectively trying to be the consummate diplomat, saying, hey, the Alaska process is still going. I understand that they've been hitting out oil fields. I understand that they're getting tomahawks, that they're going to attack us. But for all intents and purposes, this is because Trump is being pressured by the Europeans. And because Trump is being pressured by the Europeans, we still await what Trump effectively gave to us. And so we are going to let this process play out. I don't believe for a moment Lavrov entirely believes that. What Lavrov may believe is that, yeah, Trump and the Europeans are together. Trump is doing everything in his power to get some level of leverage. This seems to just be obvious at this point. I would imagine Russia has to accept that. But that they're open to diplomacy, that they continue to be open to diplomacy, even as the Trump administration tries to get leverage. And maybe the Russians believe that none of that stuff is going to ultimately work. There's that. What is Putin doing? On Putin's birthday, we talked about this slightly. Okay, we have time. What is Putin doing? And the reason why I say there's no way Lavrov believes what he's saying in that, because regardless of what Lavrov is saying, and regardless of the deference that Putin is effectively showing, they're signaling something else. Meaning Lavrov is saying in one sense, yes, we're being diplomatic. But in another sense, what they're saying is we are going to proceed militarily. We are making no changes, and not just making no changes. We have released the dogs of war, that much more so in Ukraine. This is Putin on his birthday. In fact, this is called, right, take a look at this. This is Peter Paul Fortress in St. Petersburg. That is amazing, right? Putin came here on his birthday with his generals. He came here on his birthday with his generals. These are some of the pictures of that trip. All right. Why is he in St. Petersburg on his birthday? He also visited the tomb of the other czars that are there. There's a church there with tombs of Catherine the Great, Peter the Great, emperors and czars. Catherine II apparently was the one that was able to get Odessa and establish Odessa. Many of the other ones, and the way this is being interpreted, of Putin visiting czars and the emperors at the church, you have some dumb people who are saying this is a death cult. Those people fundamentally miss the subtlety of what is taking place. Putin is there because Putin apparently has given his generals a greater license to proceed and expand whatever their military objectives and whatever their goals were prior to it. Meaning, whereas Trump is putting a lot of bluster, even though Trump has no cards, and whereas Lavrov is being a complete diplomat, even though Lavrov knows that most of what he's saying is just effectively not true. Meaning Lavrov may take that line of, we are continuing with the Alaska format, but Putin going to the tomb of the other emperors and czars with his generals is sending a message to the world that I am releasing the dogs of war. That this belief that we're going to be able to get a deal out of this is obviously subsiding. And maybe the 10% of what Lavrov believes is that when it becomes brimingly clear that all of this has failed and we've expanded further into Ukraine, we are open to negotiations once again, even though we may have added 2 or 3 more additional areas that are now under the auspices of the Russian Federation. So no, I don't believe for a moment that Lavrov believes what he's saying. I believe that what Putin and the signal that Putin has given is the honesty of the Russian position, despite the deference and everything else that is taking place with Putin. The reason why I take issue with the deference thing has to do with this idea of like, have you ever seen a child yell at an adult? It's weird, right? It looks weird. It breaks the continuity of this idea of you're a child and the adult is ideally you're better because you're a child. How you talk to people on some level gets across the power relation between the two. There's a reason that China is engaging with the United States in the way they're disengaging with the US, where it ups the ante every time the US ups the ante because it's getting across. We're equals. You're not better than me. We are equals. This idea that you are a hegemon that we need to pay attention to, and that's over with. We are peers. And I'm saying that the deference gives an impression that we are not dealing with peers. If you look at what is taking place when Donald Trump is in those meetings, and you have one person after the next kissing Trump's ass, hey, you smell so great today, sir. Your toupee is just fantastic today. Your teeth are a special shade of yellow. Your breath is, smell like ass, which is much better than what it usually smells, sir. When they're giving him those compliments, do you think that they really believe that stuff? Do you think Donald Trump really believes that stuff? Or do you think, from Trump's point of view, whether it's true or not is irrelevant to the point that you feel the need to say it, which shows a differential in power between us? Meaning the very fact that you're complimenting me demonstrates power dynamic in exponential terms. I'm saying the deferential thing also comes across in a particular way. And if they are destroying your oil industry, or trying to anyway, if they're firing missiles in your country, at your country, and you remain deferential, how does that look? And does it encourage, let's say, nefarious actors to go further? Does it egg him on in this belief that he is not being serious? Meaning, it is very clear that Putin is making the point of saying, if we need to take it all, we need to take it all. And he is signaling where the Russian military is going. Not to mention, you can see it on the battlefield, but obviously Odessa is on the list of places that Russia is going to have firmly in their pocket at the end of this military conflict. Putin, understated, is signaling what he is doing. He's like Babe Ruth pointing out his shot. Lavrov is being the complete diplomat as Putin is giving that signal. That signal will probably be clear to the Russian population, even though it will fall dead on many of the Americans and many of the other people who know nothing about what is taking place in regards to Russian history, or that even Putin was at that grave with his generals. These three men are each functioning in this, even though the appearance of it is different. All of them are putting on a certain facade. Lavrov totally knows that the Alaska process is busted up until the point where Ukraine starts losing that much more territory, or the military collapses, in which case then he can maybe renew the Alaska summit where it becomes clear that Ukraine is fundamentally lost. That may not take place. Putin, however, is at the grave, even though he's being deferential in one sense. He's getting across a clear signal that if we need to take it all, we will take it all. Period. You have our surrender document. Either sign it or you don't. Trump, on the other hand, not being deferential, by the same token, has very few cards to play in this process. All three of these men are effectively doing things in the way that they're projecting things to the outside world. And I'm saying each has this false persona that they're putting on, but the false persona looks a particular way in the way that each of them are portraying that. I hope that makes sense. It's a tale of I want to say a tale of three men, but it's not really that. To me, it's interesting how there's the face and there's the reality. Trump is weak in this. Truly, remorselessly, remarkably weak. He has no cards to play in regards to the military situation that may not, or that won't necessarily escalate this to something like a third world war. Meaning, if you want to put the US military and get NATO directly involved, okay, well, now we may be talking, but now we're talking about a nuclear war. Short of that, Ukraine is getting routed. Every bit more so every day. By the same token, he's projecting as if, well, I may fire missiles. I'm going to choose where the missiles are going to go. I'm going to choose where I'm going to hit Russia and this and that. Russia's lost 1 million men. I can't believe Putin is continuing to do this, as if he's in control of something that he is not in control of. The persona is strength. The reality is weakness. Lavrov, complete diplomat. Persona, I am infinitely diplomatic. I am a foreign minister. My job is to be a foreign minister. The Alaska summit process is still going on. Yeah, I understand they're firing missiles at us and everything else, but those missiles that are being fired that may be killing Russians has nothing to do with the Alaska summit and the process that was initiated during that Alaska summit. Does he believe it? Probably not. That is the face he's projecting to the world. In Putin's sense, well, maybe Trump should have won the Nobel Peace Prize. And, if this war wouldn't have happened if Donald Trump was in office, and blah, 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 blah. While simultaneously, I'm going to the graves with my generals and we are preparing for war. Full stop. All of these people are putting on a certain persona. And yet there's an underlying reality to all of it. Putin's persona is passivity in some sense, while projecting strength and reality. Meaning, regardless of him being pragmatic, the reality of it is Russia is directing events on the ground. Russia is obviously a massive military power at this point. And Putin is clearly winning the war. Ukraine is being routed. Lavrov is being completely diplomatic, but probably believes very little of what he is actually saying. At least God knows, I hope he believes or doesn't believe what he's saying. And Trump, full of bluster, full of hubris, full of ego, a man searching for leverage. And if you're searching for it, you obviously don't have it. It is very interesting what is taking place. It is also very dangerous. When you get Trump coming out saying stuff like this, that Russia has lost 1.5 million men, one of two things is true. Either he believes it, which will embolden him to dumb actions, or he's just lying, which would indicate that, again, he's lying for reasons, those reasons being to continue with this process. Buckle up. Buckle up. So there's that. Okay, my guess is running late. Okay, let's go to the next story. Donald Trump is claiming that India is no longer going to take Russian oil. Now, don't take my word for it. He broke this as if it was news. He literally broke this as if it was news. And in saying that he's no longer going to take Russian oil, right? I just had the clip up. Right here. All right. He is giving Modi all sorts of compliments. He's like, oh, Modi is fantastic. Modi is great. Now, mind you, the other day he was talking about how he's destroyed BRICS, how BRICS is toast, et cetera, et cetera. This is Trump today.
I've watched India for years. It's an incredible country. And every single year you'd have a new leader. I mean, some would be in there for a few months. And this was year after year after year. And my friend has been there now for a long time. And he's assured me there will be no oil purchased from Russia. I don't know. Maybe that's a breaking story. Can I say that? Would you say? There will be no oil. He's not buying his oil from Russia. It started. You can't do it immediately. It's a little bit of a process. But the process is going to be over with soon. You have to understand.
Just to be clear. Now, question. If a habitual liar comes on and says something that up to this point has been farcical, and he says they are not going to buy any oil, what should your first response be? Should your first response be, well, obviously, it's the president of the United States, he's going to be telling the truth. I mean, why would Donald Trump lie? Or should your response be, habitual liars lie. This doesn't even sound right. And this makes no sense. It's the latter. Modi comes out within a few hours of Donald Trump saying that and points out India's consumers right here. India responds to Trump claiming it won't buy Russian oil imports guided entirely by Indian consumer. It's like, dude, what are you talking about? How are you lying on this massive scale in this way? My point is, Trump is lying. Trump is lying. But his lips are moving, so, it shouldn't be that hard to figure out. Oh, my guest is here. Excellent. Excellent, excellent. My man, how you doing, David? You doing okay today?
Yeah, not bad. You?
I am doing well. Better that you are with me. Wait, there's something going on with your video. Move for me. I want to see if. Oh, okay. That may be on my end. My Wi-Fi has been a little bit weird. But I'm glad you could join me, man. Just so the audience will know, David. Please pronounce your last name. It's been a while since I've seen it. I don't want to F it up.
Hundeyin.
Thank you. Okay, so I was right. David Hundeyin. If I can pull up on my calendar. There we are. David Hundeyin. He's an investigative journalist, author, filmmaker, founder of West Africa Weekly, and is a 2023 James Curry Fellow at Cambridge University. I always have to tell myself it's not who died, it's who day. But I was right. In my head, I was right. I should have just went for it. Thank you for joining me, man. I hope you're doing okay today.
Yeah, very much so.
I came across. Well, let's start with Madagascar first. And I'm not even sure if you know what is taking place in Madagascar. Obviously, there's the basics. The military has effectively joined the crowd. The crowd was in massive protests. France flew out the president of Madagascar. France made it very clear, hey, we're not getting militarily involved. We just flew the president out. We're not going to engage in your internal processes. The president effectively said it's a coup. From my understanding, this president came to power in a coup several years prior, even though he eventually won an election, which is why he was in now. The audience or the people were very angry about electricity, poverty, corruption, etc. Basically something that's in every country. I don't know what is going on beyond that. And I'm not sure if you've paid attention to this issue. Can you give us a heads up on this?
I have paid some attention to it. In my newsroom, we have paid some attention to it, but we're also going to be honest enough to say that even for us on the continent, we're still waiting for more information because there's several contradictory pieces of information. So, for example, you were right in saying that he's been evacuated by the French. He was evacuated on the French military aircraft. He himself, that's the president who has just been overthrown, he himself is a dual French citizen. So he's a French Madagascan citizen. So on the surface, what that would appear to tell you is that this is some sort of popular uprising against a French-backed, puppet. However, where the contradiction then comes in is when you examine his record. This is somebody whose domestic policy has been very, very, very left-wing. I'll go as far as to call it socialist.
Yeah.
So under his tenure as president, subsidies have been introduced for everything. He's governed very, very well to the left of center. So, if this were some sort of uprising against, I don't know, an imperialist-backed president or something, like the picture doesn't fit. It's not a neat narrative. So it's actually quite hard to say what exactly is going on. What we do know is that the French government appears to have some sort of an interest in keeping him safe.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we also do know that it would not be accurate to describe him as just your typical African French-backed, puppet president whose job is to hemorrhage the country's natural resources to France. That's not really true in this case. So I guess the information that we need to know is how did these protests actually come to be? Because that's what will tell us what is actually going on here. All we know so far is that it's a Gen Z-led protest against the usual things that Gen Zs have been protesting about all over the world, from Africa to Asia to Europe. But as we saw with the events in Nepal and in Indonesia and in Bangladesh, these easy narratives about, oh, there's corruption, the Gen Zs are they're not having it. Those are just smoke screens more often than not. More often than not, there's a hand behind the scenes guiding things along. So in the case of Nepal, I think we now know, all of us should know by now, it was the hand of Ned, which is basically the CIA. In this case, we simply don't know. That's the honest to God truth. We have no idea. There's a significant non-zero possibility that this is actually some sort of organic uprising, which would be surprising to me if that were the case, because again, the fact that the military effectively joined the protest by stating that they were not going to enforce, military order on what was a rapidly deteriorating security situation, suggests to me that there's been some coordination behind the scenes, and potentially at least some parts of the military were already in on it. And if that is the case, it then begs the question, so who has the capacity to put such a plot together, which would suggest some sort of international geopolitical actor. But until we know who that actor is, it's extremely difficult to say, which is why in our newsroom, we barely covered it. We're kind of waiting to see more information emerge before taking a position on it.
Oh, thank you for that. And thank you for your honesty on that. Because this is one of those things where you look at it, you'd be like, okay, what just happened? What just took place? Right?
Exactly.
You have the military who effectively says, okay, we're going to side with the protesters. And then he's like, I'm going to declare myself president. I think October 18th or 19th. It's going to be coming up pretty soon, where he's effectively going to swear himself in as a power broker. Do we know anything about the guy who is taking power in this case?
I guess in the coming few hours and days, we'll know a lot more about him. Right now, personally, from our point of view, is a completely unknown quantity.
Wow.
So again, which is why I said it's been very difficult to get a handle on exactly what it is that is going on here. If indeed this is something which has been orchestrated behind the scenes, then this has been very, very well organized, very well coordinated. This has been done in a way that has been very successful at obscuring, at least for the moment, who is behind it. So I'm very curious to see what information emerges over the coming few days.
Yeah. I mean, when they say the president was flown out, how's France related to this? Because you told me once before that in one of the states, when there was like this kind of uprising, France brought in military in order to put down the uprising.
Yes.
And in this case, France was very clear. Hey, we're just taking them out. Continue on with what you guys are doing, which to me is super suspicious, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So, if again, this is a theory. This is not something which has been confirmed in any meaningful way, but a theory floating around in our newsroom is that potentially this person was installed by France and then, for whatever reason, decided to try and basically rebel, to go against the grain, which has happened in other places before.
Yeah.
Where a president comes in with the backing of foreign power and then decides to become a nationalist afterwards. And foreign power is like, no, we put you there, we can take you out. So it's possible that happened here. Because again, in circumstances under which he took power, he basically took power in a coup in 2009. And even though he was a civilian, the military backed him, which again suggests that this is not just anybody. This is someone with some significant geopolitical standing and value. So potentially, this theory is that maybe this is some sort of French asset who was parachuted into that position and then went rogue and decided to become a Madagascar nationalist. And then the mothership in Paris was like, no, we can't have that. So
time for you to go. Yeah.
Here's a color revolution, but we'll take you out. You'll be safe, but we're not having any of that right now. So again, it's just a theory, but I guess if it's the closest thing that we have to a sort of plausible explanation for why there's so many contradictory things happening.
color revolutions are a powerful device, man, because it's hard, like,
Extremely very much.
because it puts you in a situation as a leader of, do we shoot a population? And depending upon the population, especially if, let's say, for example, the grievances are real. Let's take Nepal, where you have people who are really pissed off about real things, and yet those people are effectively being directed as useful idiots to accomplish an objective.
Yeah,
It's like, okay,
exactly.
well, how do you deal with that, right? Like, as a government, what do? You can't, you know that they're well-meaning, meaning in regards to what they want. You also know that they're being led and directed by a foreign entity. How do you, like, you can't see a military out to
It's
shoot
it's an
a population.
unsolvable problem. It's an
Yeah,
unsolvable problem, and that's why the mechanisms that activate color revolutions in other people's countries are so dangerous. And that's why for any country that has any plans of gaining or retaining sovereignty, gaining control of the civic space, or at least visibility over the civic space, is a top priority, because how color revolutions work is that they effectively weaponize the population against the government. Right? So um, in a situation where, for example, a developing country, a resource-rich developing country that has something that a richer country wants, and the richer country would remain, for this developing country to remain poor. And then you have, say, a government that has the opposite ambition. This government wants to develop the country. It doesn't want to sell natural resources cheaply. It wants to move up the value chain. All of those things that you're supposed to do to develop. And in the process of doing some of these things, certain decisions, tough decisions, have to be made. Unavoidably, this has been the case everywhere in the world, both in the West and in the East. And then you have these actors, these characters that foment color revolutions, then exploiting these local grievances, and because grievances always exist everywhere,
yeah,
exploiting those, and then putting money into those cracks and turning those little cracks and fissures into huge problems, until eventually a crisis is basically manufactured out of nothing. And then you have the desired regime change operation, which is the goal of color revolution. So this has been done to very great effect across parts of Eastern Europe. It has been done in parts of Asia. It has been done in Africa, probably more than anywhere else. So I think now, more than ever at this point in time, the governments, especially in the global south, which have any ambition whatsoever of attaining development, need to see foreign actors that are involved in their civil society spaces and their civic spaces and their information and journalism spaces as potential attack vectors. They need to see them the same way they see foreign troops.
yeah,
So the same way most of them would reflexively reject the deployment of foreign troops on their soil, they also need to see foreign information agents the same way. Because I would argue actually that a color revolution is actually much more dangerous, much more injurious to the fabric of a society than a simple invasion, right? Because the military invasion is something which can be repelled. It's something which once it's like the people know who the enemy is, so there's a very clear and easily definable objective for how to reverse it. A color revolution, on the other hand, is not just about executing regime change. It's about morphing the character of a society. It's about changing a culture, basically terraforming an entire country's character without its consent. That, to me, is a lot more insidious and a lot more dangerous than simple military invasion. And we've seen this, for example, the country that I come from, Nigeria, where in 2015, that was a color revolution. Some would say the original African color revolution of the 21st century, because that template has been rolled out elsewhere since then. And what has happened since then is that the divisions that already existed within Nigerian society have now become so pronounced that conversations that I never used to hear as a child, conversations, for example, about potentially breaking up Nigeria, about some regions seceding and becoming an independent country,
Really?
having a sovereign referendum, and this one breaking off, Nigeria potentially breaking off into 6 or 9 little ethno states, that sort of thing. These were not conversations that I was ever familiar with, that I was ever acquainted with, having
Wait,
grown
just to
up
be
and
clear,
spent.
you're saying this is happening now in Nigeria, where they're
Yes,
having
yes, it
conversations about
absolutely
breaking
is.
Nigeria. Wow.
It absolutely is right now. And the reason it is happening is because the type of machinations that made 2015 possible operated through exploiting these divisions. These divisions already existed. Nigeria has fought a civil war before between 1967 and 1970. But by the time I came around in 1990, you couldn't see this was a country that was clearly healing. I wouldn't say it had healed, but it was healing. And then all of a sudden, a foreign actor from another continent decides, how do we get the change of government that we want to a more pliant regime that will do the things that we want them to do? Because this current government is becoming more closely affiliated with China. They're becoming a bedrock of China's Belt and Road Initiative strategy in Africa. They're taking on a lot of Chinese infrastructure investment. If this continues, basically, they're going to stop being poor. They're going to stop playing the role that they play in the global economy, which threatens our place in the global economy. So how do we change that? And how do we ensure that we don't just change a government, but we also make it impossible for the conditions for a nationalist government to emerge again? How do we do that? We do that by exploiting these divisions that had very nearly been forgotten about, and we create problems where they didn't exist. So, when I was growing up the commercial capital of Nigeria, which is Lagos, a city of 21 million people, it's the largest city in Africa, there was never a question, for example, about who is allowed to live in Lagos, because Lagos was just thought of as it's the melting pot of Nigeria. Lagos is where everything happens in Nigeria. Now we've started having conversations about who owns Lagos. Oh, it belongs to this ethnic group, and if you don't speak this language, you're not allowed to run for office in Lagos. Things which never used to exist. Lagos has always been multi-ethnic, has been governed by multiple people from multiple ethnicities, and that has never been a problem. All of a sudden now, in 2025, it has become a major topic for conversation out of nowhere all of a sudden. These were not conversations that existed before, and that is a direct result of the color revolution that took place in 2015, because it wasn't just a regime change, it was a total morphing of Nigeria's national character. So taking us from a place where we thought of ourselves as a generally cohesive country, not a completely cohesive country, there were problems, but generally speaking, a country that had some sort of group identity, and then fractured into these little micro-ethnic, micro-religious identities, such that now to express a Nigerian nationalist position in the public space, which I do regularly, almost comes across as inauthentic, because it's become almost a strange thing now. And this is something which has been externally orchestrated. So in the space of 10 years, the entire idea of what it means to be Nigerian has been shifted. And that shift wasn't locally orchestrated. It was orchestrated from Washington, D.C. So that's the danger that color revolutions present. And that's why governments around the world, especially in the Global South, must see foreign actors in their civic, information, and civil society spaces as threats, and must treat them as such. At the very least, that would mean, for example, introducing the same kind of legislation that the US has, for example. So the Foreign Agents Registration Act, for example. Most countries in the Global South do not have equivalent legislation. So the kind of political activity that you will not be able to carry out in the US as a foreigner, Americans are able to come to your country and do that all willy-nilly, without any restriction whatsoever. Like if I were to go to the US and try to take part in a US presidential campaign to influence the ways that Americans vote, and I'm a Nigerian citizen, I would go to prison for 5 years if I did that and I wasn't registered as a foreign agent under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. In Nigeria, there is no such legislation, so an American can come and do that, which is why you had David Axelrod. You might know him very well. He ran the 2015 presidential campaign in Nigeria for the candidate that eventually won, Obama's candidate, right? That is essentially a federal crime in the US, but in Nigeria, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, Georgia is a really good example where they were trying to affect, if you remember, Georgia was trying to get a FARA type law, and Europe and the US freaked out.
They called it the Russian law.
Yeah, but it was a US law. The US
exactly.
law into play. And Georgia was like, how are you freaking out when you have the same law? And of course, the reason was obvious, right? We have a ton of money that is in Georgia. We're trying to overthrow that government because we want to effectively use them as a second front for Russia, the war in Ukraine. But, Europe lost their minds over this. Does Africa know what you just pointed out? This idea that when you have these NGOs, when you have these embassies, when you have, let's say, these foreign entities that are in your country, that these things are not necessarily being used on the up and up, that they are also being used as a vector to go after the internal stability of the country itself, especially in the context of protests?
Unfortunately, a lot of this information is just, it exists, it's there, people can Google it, it's there, but unfortunately, it's just not present in the public space in this part of the world. Unfortunately, to even talk about these things in this part of the world, one might get labeled a conspiracy theorist, for example, right? And that's not by accident, because I'm sure it wouldn't surprise you to know the Americans have been hard at work putting certain sort of thought-terminating terms and cliches into heavy rotation in the public space in Africa. So, for example, that term, conspiracy theorist, 10 years ago, that term didn't exist in the Nigerian public lexicon. Now you see it on Nigerian social media every day. You see it in African social media every day. Again, that's that influx of foreign influence to the point of even morphing your vocabulary and your grammar, and morphing how you think about yourself and how you think about ideas and how you think about thinking, right? That's the very clever thing that has been done. So unfortunately, no, a lot of this information to most people in this part of the world is just either something completely academic and seemingly of no relevance to them, or it's just, oh, these guys come again. It's these Pan-Africanist people and their conspiracy theories, always blaming white people for everything. They never take responsibility for their problems, and yada, yada, yada. That's like, these are the things that are used to terminate thoughts in this part of the world. And unfortunately, they're very successful.
David, your mic is it's cracking a bit. Is there any way that you can either come in, like go out and come back in, or try to adjust just a little bit, because it's difficult to hear?
I hope that is better.
Say a few more words.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I've brought it a bit closer, so I hope that works.
Oh no, you're fine. Okay, that sounds fine. No, you sound good. You sound good. Yeah, man, that's wild. I mean, this is one of those things that Brian Berletti talks about, controlling information space. Like how countries need to have the capability of controlling the information. Like it's always, that sucks, but it's always dicey. The moment that you're controlling, like I'll give you an example. Europe decides, well, we obviously need to control our information space. Okay, how do you do that? Well, we're going to get rid of RT and Sputnik. And hey, we may even get rid of, it was the other network that they kept claiming was associated with Russia. We're just going to do that. And it's like, okay, but you guys are just lying. Like you've effectively eliminated any opposition point of view in your societies. And my ex, the stuff that you used to tell me, I used to be like, you really believe that? Like that's what they're telling you guys?
But the thing is, regardless of whether they're lying or not, there's still something to take away from that. And that something is, regardless of whether it's true or not, that Russia is guilty of certain things or not, and RT deserves to be deplatformed or whatever. The point is, the Europeans identified what they thought of as their interests, and identified what they thought of as a foreign influence that was contrary to their interests. And they took action to cut off what they considered to be that foreign influence that was inimical to their interest. So I think countries in the global south can borrow that way of reasoning, that you need to identify where your interests lie and identify where opposing interests lie, because you do have enemies, you do have opposing interests. You're not floating in the sky, without context. You're part of a global reality, and you do have enemies. So you need to identify who those enemies are, who those opposing interests are, where their information attack vectors exist in your countries, and you need to isolate and eliminate them. Exactly the same way the Europeans have done. Whether they were justified in doing that to RT or not, the point is those are the rules upon which the world works. Those are the real rules upon which the world works. The world works on the rules of enlightened self-interest. And unfortunately, in the global south, instead of operating under the rules of enlightened self-interest, we operate under this fiction called international law, which is a total fiction, right? We operate under the idea that there's an international community, there's a global rules-based system. There is no such thing. It's the jungle out here. That's just the reality. So we need to act like we live in the jungle, and we need to survive. Our primary responsibility to ourselves is to survive.
Agree. That you have my perfect agreement. I guess that I am being selfish when I'm thinking about this, because I'm thinking about like, I give you an example, but everything you said was correct. This is a jungle, and you do need to control your information space. I guess the issue that I have is sometimes countries themselves are the enemies of the people. And in the way that they're deciding that this is in our interests. That interest may end up getting a bunch of Europeans killed. Or in the US, where they decide, hey, it's in our interests to buy TikTok and say how awesome Israel is on TikTok. It's like, okay, is that really in my interest, right? That's somebody else's interest, not mine. Governments will do that. And I know governments will do that, because that's what Europe is doing. That's what the United States on some level is doing. So I don't know, it just sucks. You're right. There's no, rules-based order. It's just the jungle, and you have to deal with the fact that it's the jungle. And you just hope governments are being more honest in the way that they deal with their populations, even though governments and governments.
Fingers crossed on that.
Yeah. I came across this guy who was talking about Russia and Sudan. It confused the hell out of me. Please. What is Russia's role in the Sudan war? Let's just.
I will be the first person to say I have absolutely no idea, because in as much as I follow the goings on in Sudan very closely, Russia is like the only or one of the few major geopolitical actors that I simply haven't heard much from in the context of Sudan. So I've heard a lot about the involvement of the Gulf powers, specifically the UAE, and to a lesser extent Qatar and Saudi Arabia. I've heard something about the potential involvement of Egypt, because there's a whole other angle of Egypt's supposed interest in the destabilization of Sudan, because as I'm sure you know, the Nile River, which supplies 95% of Egypt's water needs, flows through Sudan into Egypt, and partly as a result of the new dam that was recently inaugurated in Ethiopia, Egypt sees a threat to its continued existence through more potential constructions along the Nile basin. So the theory goes that supposedly Egypt is helping to keep Sudan stabilized, so that Sudan doesn't have the stability needed to build infrastructure along the Nile basin, so that Egypt can keep on getting water. So I've heard a lot of these things, but I've never heard about anything concerning Russia. So that could be my sort of professional blind spots. That could be my ignorance. I don't know. So I will need to do significantly more research on that to be able to offer anything.
But that is wild to me. So the African countries, despite the fact that there's an African Union, they still have their petty grievances and their
absolutely. So in this case, the grievance stems from it was a colonial era document that was created by the British, supposedly dividing the usage rights for the Nile. Now, unfortunately, the Brits, being the notorious racists that they were, didn't consider Ethiopians to be human. They're like Africans. So Ethiopia was not even included in the agreement. So it was basically an agreement between Egypt and to a lesser extent Sudan. And that was pretty much it. Ethiopia, where an estimated 85% of the Nile originates from, and Uganda, where I think 15% originates from, they were not included in this agreement. So according to this colonial era treaty, Ethiopia and Uganda basically have no rights to the Nile River, even though they are the sources
I'm
of the
sorry to
Nile
interrupt.
River.
Did you say 80% of the Nile River comes through Ethiopia or comes out of Ethiopia?
85%.
Egypt has built dams.
Multiple dams.
Yeah,
Dams.
they have claimed almost like ownership of the Nile.
Exactly. But obviously, the Nile does not originate in Egypt. It originates from the highlands of East Africa. So it's Ethiopia and Uganda. So the Blue Nile and the brown Nile from Uganda, the Blue Nile from Ethiopia, which converge and then become the Nile, which flows into Egypt and then empties out into the Red Sea. So Egypt, based on this colonial era treaty, believes that it essentially owns the Nile, which it doesn't. And obviously the Ethiopians beg to disagree. So they constructed this huge dam, this 2,000 megawatt hydroelectric dam called the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam.
Yeah,
and the Egyptians have been going absolutely crazy about it, have been threatening to carry out an airstrike on the dam, have been threatening war and all sorts of things. And the issue is not just potentially that the dam is going to restrict water flow, because it's not. The issue actually, which I guess the Egyptians are being very coy about, the issue is that historically, I don't know if you're aware of this, this is something that goes back thousands of years actually, back to the ancient Egypt of antiquity. It used to be a thing of great, that used to puzzle them, that during the dry season in Egypt, the Nile actually had strengthened flows. So like you would expect that during the dry season, the volume of the Nile would shrink. It would actually expand, and then it would bring fertile soils with it, which is how come the Nile estuary in Egypt is one of the most fertile places in the world. So basically all of Egypt's irrigated agriculture takes place within the Nile estuary.
Interesting.
And what was later discovered thousands of years later was that the reason that happens is that during that hot season, because the water originates from the highlands in East Africa, which are icy. So during the hot season, it's like kind of like the Himalayas and the monsoon season in India, something similar. So during the hot season, more water is melted, so more water flows into the Nile, which is how come Egypt essentially experiences a blessing during its wash time. And those fertile soils are coming from Ethiopia and Uganda. Now, what the dam potentially might do is it will allow it's not going to significantly change water flow, because the dam doesn't consume water, it just redirects it. So Egypt will be fine with water flow, but those fertile soils, which basically save Egypt billions of dollars every year in fertilizer costs, those fertile soils are no longer going to flow into Egypt. So Egypt is going to have to start spending a lot more money on fertilizer for agriculture. That is actually what this issue is about. The Egyptians don't want to come out and say it. So they're making it about water. It's not actually about water. It's much more than just water. So the theory goes that they have an interest in maintaining both Sudan and Ethiopia in a relative state of underdevelopment, because that benefits Egypt. And yes, you're right in saying that it's the job of the African Union to mediate on issues like this and ensure that whatever treaty or agreement is arrived at ensures equitable sharing of resources for everyone along the riparian routes of the river. Unfortunately, the AU, as I've mentioned to you before, is essentially a vassal organization of the European Union. It's majority funded by the European Union. So the actual mechanisms that are supposed to handle things like this are basically either dormant or non-existent. The only AU mechanisms that actually work are things relating to things that the EU has an interest in. So if the EU doesn't have a direct interest in whether Egypt wants to go to war with Ethiopia or Sudan or whatever, then that issue just kind of lies on the back burner forever. And that's kind of the situation we're in. So both countries are involved in like a war of words now, just shooting official statements back and forth. You know, Ethiopia is accusing Egypt of colonial era thinking and being self-serving. Egypt is accusing Ethiopia of collaborating with Israel to construct a dam that it didn't need to construct, and accusing Ethiopia of taking funding from Israel to construct the dam, which then interpreted as an insult, and it's a whole lot of back. So that's what we are.
Wow, you were working with a genocidal state. They went nuclear. They went nuclear on that one. Jesus. I mean, have you noticed an energy? And let me ask this. I know this is going to sound somewhat strange, but with the Sahel states and this overt advocation, or this overt advocation of sovereignty, has that bled into other parts of Africa? Like, meaning, if you're the African Union and you're watching this take place, as you point out, this is something that obviously of their purview. You would think that it's in their purview to not have member states militarily attacking each other. When they see like the Sahel states, and they see these states pushing very heavy in this notion of sovereignty, heavy in this notion of self-development of the individual states themselves, does that have an effect on the larger African continent that you've been able to see in the context of the countries themselves? Especially the countries that are beside it. You would think that the countries beside it will see the development that's taking place in those states. And I don't know, would it change them?
It is definitely having an effect. It's certainly having a political effect. So I don't know if you saw the news a few weeks back that Niger and Burkina Faso are currently cooperating with Russia on constructing nuclear reactors in both countries. Shortly after that announcement was made, Ethiopia made its own announcement, and it's also going into a collaboration with, I believe, Rosatom, which is the Russian state-owned nuclear energy company, to construct its own nuclear reactor. Because obviously Ethiopia historically has been, generally speaking, more Eastern aligned than Western aligned anyway. Which is not to say that Ethiopia is some, anti-imperialist stronghold. It's not. But historically, generally speaking, it's been more Eastern than Western aligned. And it has over 100 million people. It considers itself as a country which rightfully ought to be one of the largest economies in Africa. So it's actually making moves toward that end. So it's expanding its public infrastructure stock. It's expanding its access to power and energy, which is why the dam that I referenced earlier was so important, or is so important to it. And so construction of nuclear reactors now, I think, is a statement of intent, right? Because usually that tends to be the sort of red line that most African countries are just afraid of getting to. That once you mention the word nuclear, then you get the world searchlight beamed on your head, and you don't want that kind of attention. But for these countries to come out and openly state, for a country like Ethiopia to come out and openly state that it's constructing a nuclear reactor, I think that's a very big that's a very bold statement. And then even as far afield as Botswana, which is like right down at the southern tip of the continent, the new president, who he may or may not be serious about it, he may or may not mean it, but he has been making references to the Sahelian states. He delivered a speech that I watched recently where he mentioned that the structure of the electoral or the democratic system that he operates in essentially acts as a constraint for him to actually get things done. And he actually referenced Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso as someone who can wake up and give instructions and ensure that things get done. Meanwhile, he has to go through this whole rigmarole for the slightest thing to happen. That obviously that's not an action, but that's a sign that politically everyone across the continent has taken notice. Whether that's going to lead to a political revolution as far afield as Botswana, we honestly don't know that yet. But I mean, I'll also mention something else. In South Africa, which is like right at the southern tip of the continent, there are politicians in South Africa who are actually right now as we speak in Burkina Faso. There's a if you're familiar with the party called the Economic Freedom Fighters, the EFF,
Yeah.
which is led by Julius Malema, they actually have an ongoing, it's sort of ongoing engagement, like on-ground engagement in Burkina Faso with the Burkinabe government. I spoke to someone from that party, it's a lady called, her name is Prof. Kanyisile Shabalala Litchfield. She's currently in, or she was last week. I don't know if she's still there, but she goes back and forth a lot. I believe she's a serving MP under the EFF, and she basically, she engages directly with the Burkinabe government. I know there are other political formations across Southern Africa that have similar direct engagement with the Sahelian government. So I'm not going to sit here and make a prediction that by so and so year, so and so, such and such spectacular event is going to have happened. I think that's a fool's errand. However, what I will say is that both on the ground and in the ivory towers, everyone across the continent has taken notice. I think the major reason that they're taking notice is that, first of all, these three countries, having made what I consider to be some of the boldest decisions that have been made in post-colonial African history, are still standing. The governments are still strong. Because typically what would have happened is that by this time there would have been some color revolution that would have been staged, there would have been a coup, there would have been a massive breakdown in local security. So I guess the whole continent was just kind of waiting to see that, is that going to happen this time? And it's not happened at all. And in fact, these countries are on a construction binge, and everyone is slowly coming around to the realization that, okay, these guys may have cracked the code. These guys may have figured out how to get this thing done. So it will start, like in the case of Ethiopia, it's just one. So it will start as a trickle and then a deluge. So I'm definitely seeing signs of that trickle. We're not there yet, absolutely not. It's still very much a very small trickle.
Yeah.
But once I guess the proof of concept has been tested, then it becomes a deluge. When exactly that will be, it's a fool's errand to say, but I'm fairly confident that within my lifetime, certainly, I'm going to see it happen.
You can see it. Yeah, God, man, it's so complicated because it's a mental issue on some level. Weirdly enough, part of it is mental and part of it is physical. And what I mean by that is, it takes a recognition that a political system that was set up in a colonial sense is a straitjacket.
Yeah,
that's not easy because I don't know how it is there in the States. You're told this is the only government that works. Democracy.
Exactly. That is exactly what we're told here. That it's almost it's like heresy to go out in public and say, you know what, electoral democracy is really not it, and I don't believe electoral democracy in our context. If you say that, as I have been saying, you get typecast as one thing or the other. So there are a lot of people who have a lot of very funny ideas about who I am and what I represent. Some people think that I'm some sort of Vladimir Putin is my Svengali, and I'm his African mouthpiece. Some people think maybe there's Chinese money in my bank account or something. Because the Chinese apparently have a lot of money supposedly to throw around. Some people think, oh, you're driven by hatred of white people or something. So a lot of people think a lot of things about me. Meanwhile, it's for me a very simple and obvious calculation that based on our local context and our local circumstances, this is what is likely to work for us. And this is what has not worked for 65 years. And this is what is clearly not going to work if we do it for another 650,000 years. So, but again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about that influx of foreign control in your civic spaces and your information spaces, where what you think of as your civic awareness and your civic knowledge is being dictated to you by people who are working for Washington, D.C.
Right.
So you're not even allowed to have a conversation, or you were not even allowed to have an honest conversation about, for example, what method of governance works for us. There was only one answer. So there was no question. there was just an answer. Right? So it's like when you're filling in a form online and there's no drop down menu, there's just an option that has been pre-selected for you, and that answer is democracy. That's it. And even under that democracy, you're not allowed to query that. Aren't there different kinds of democracy? You know, then we have systems even prior to colonization that could be referred to as democratic. This sort of Greek, Athens style, one man, one vote, balloting system. Is that what democracy means? Because even the word democracy, is that what it means? Democracy it means government of the people, for the people, by the people. Right. It doesn't mean electoral balloting. That's a very specific subset of a democratic process. But the entire word has been boiled down to that. You're not even allowed to say that, because the word democracy has been equated to having a voter's card and going to put a thumbprint next to a candidate's picture on election day. And that's it. That's your duty as a citizen. And beyond that, whatever the outcome of that is, whether the person announced as winner was actually voted for by the people or not, once that announcement has been made, it's your job to stand behind the person that you didn't, clearly nobody voted for. And apparently that is democracy. And if you beg to disagree, then you're a Russian puppet or something. You're a Russian agent.
Yeah, it's weird,
so
right?
that's what I mean.
No, I totally get it. The entire point of the government is to be able to get stuff done. And whatever that arrangement is, to be able to get stuff done, especially, I mean, in a situation where the government is being manipulated, like meaning when you have this quote unquote democracy in the way that they define it, and that democracy is being used and manipulated in order to give outcomes that are not in the interest of the public itself. Yeah. What do you do? Like, is the expectation really for the people to just submit to something that obviously is not in their best interest and not working for them? And then the moment that you rebel, they're like, oh my God, there's a hunter. Okay, what if the hunter is actually doing what it needs to be done? And the public backs it. Meaning you still get public will saying, yes, this is what we want, because this is actually doing the job that this other political device wasn't doing. No, I totally get your point on that. And you're right. It is a hurdle to get around intellectually to say that, because, from the time you're born to the time you usually hit the grave, you're beaten ahead. This is what you need. This is the way it looks. This is the form of government that is the thing that actually works with the population. And then you look around and say, but that's not working for the population. And by the way, even in America, like where America calls itself the city on the hill, and you look at these guys, the United States, people in the US die like 5 years earlier than in Europe. And the US's response to that is to cut healthcare by nearly $1 trillion to the poorest in the population and give that money effectively to the rich. Like Princeton did this study, and what they found was the political will of the population only accounts for maybe 1% of influence in the political space. So effectively, what the public wants doesn't matter. And the political system is there to enshrine the fact that the public doesn't matter, but to give them rituals, like they're rituals to God or something like that, that nobody pays attention to, but they can feel good about because they were part of the ritual. No, I totally get it, man. I totally get it. I've kept you long. David, you're awesome. And I thank you for this. You're a wealth of information, like nobody's business. And I swear, oftentimes I just sit here and be like, this is fascinating. We don't get a huge amount of content about the African continent in America. And so when I finally get guests that can explain what's taking place on the ground, I am deeply appreciative of those guests. Kofi is another one. You are great on this. Thank you for this. David Hundeyin.
Hundeyin, yes.
Yep. Hundeyin, yeah. He is an investigative journalist, author, filmmaker. He's founder of West Africa Weekly and the 2023 James Carey Fellow at Cambridge University. I hadn't asked you about this in advance. Can we mention this other thing or leave it?
We'll leave it.
Okay, we'll leave it.
I guess we'll just leave it for now,
Yeah. Okay, we'll leave it until this thing. But David has done something fantastic. I'll just say it that way. He's done something fantastic and deserves a huge amount of praise for it. But man, thank you for this. You be safe, okay?
No worries.
Thank you. All right, David is awesome. My video feed is screwing up royally. What I interpret it as his video feed, but I think it's my video feed, is my freezing? Can you hear me okay? Let me know. Thumbs up, say yes, say no. Because I think something is going wrong with my own signal. I would have to see the video after the fact. But you guys were saying that David sounded fine. Oh, so okay. So okay. Okay. Nothing is ever free. Jamal, it's the aliens. Is it the aliens? That's what is going on. Now David is awesome, man. David is awesome. And I have another awesome guest coming up right now. Karen Kwiatkowski. How you doing, Karen? You doing okay today?
Fine. Yes, better than yesterday.
Good. And I want to point out how I nailed that last name.
Very good.
No, I'm glad that you could join me. I'm glad that you're feeling better. My mom used to get migraines, so I know those things are debilitating.
Yeah.
No, thank you for joining me. In fact, you're not the only one that had somewhat of a migraine. I failed the other day, and I have this huge knot on the back of my head that is.
Oh no.
Yeah, I'll live. I'm okay. I'm just bruised. But Lieutenant, or let's say retired Lieutenant Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski, she is a retired U.S. Air Force officer whose assignments included duties as a Pentagon desk officer and various roles in the National Security Agency. She's author of several books, including African Crisis Response Initiative, Past, Present, and Future, and also Expeditionary Air Operations in Africa, Challenges and Solutions. One day, I'm going to have to pull you in on the Africa thing. I'm very curious about, I guess, your research into Africa.
It's from like 20 something years ago when I was in the military, and they were published through military publishers because they have they're about military programs pretty much. But yeah, I learned a lot in putting those books together. It was interesting. I think a lot of things might have changed. Some things might be the same, but also there's a lot that's gone on since then. We could talk about this. When I wrote this, it was prior to AFRICOM. The command that they set
really
up.
okay.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that Trump did, not 100% sure, but I think they've pulled back on the idea of AFRICOM, and they've put it back into European Command, which again, it's all imperial colonial models that we use, to try to reach out and govern the whole world. But yeah, there's interesting stuff there. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's our way of trying to control all of these different continents, even if it's leveraged through other countries. It's still us trying to control these various continents.
Right. Yep, absolutely.
I would like to start with Venezuela. So the Trump administration obviously has been murdering Venezuelans off the coast or on the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
This has been pretty mind-blowing because there is no law that he's using to do this. Donald Trump, who's a habitual liar, just says, well, they're smuggling drugs. And so I have the right as president to send the military out to murder people in boats. Some of these people were not even Venezuelans. Apparently some were Colombians. Trinidad Tobago was another one where he has killed people who were on boats in the Caribbean. Donald Trump doesn't know who he's killing.
Yeah.
So he came out today, I believe this came out. Yes, this was today. Listen to what he says here. This is pretty amazing. And again, there's no pushback to this. There is nobody saying, wait a minute, the president's just murdering random people. You would think that in a functional government, they would say the president doesn't have the power to just murder people at his whims. And I know Obama was doing it because Obama had a kill list, but nobody said anything to Obama doing it either. This is what he's saying. He's given his reason or rationale for just murdering random people.
Why did you authorize the CIA to go into Venezuela? And is there more information you can share about these strikes on the alleged?
Well, I can't do that, but I authorized for two reasons, really. Number one, they have emptied their prisons into the United States of America. They came in through the border. They came in because we had an open border policy. And as soon as I heard that, I said, a lot of these countries, they're not the only country, but they're the worst abuser. And they've entered they've allowed thousands and thousands of prisoners, mental institution, people from mental institutions, insane asylums, emptied out into the United States. We're bringing them back, but that's a really bad, and they did it at a level that probably not, many countries have done it, but not like Venezuela. They were down and dirty. And the other thing are drugs. We have a lot of drugs coming in from Venezuela.
Why did you?
So, that is a pretty amazing statement.
Yeah,
It doesn't
especially.
matter. No, please.
I mean, you can check the data, and first off, drugs. We do get drugs in this country from all kinds of places: Mexico and Canada, China, Colombia, different places. I think when I checked, and when I was last week or earlier, I guess it was earlier this week, I was looking at the data. Where does the drugs come from in America? The illegal drugs that Trump is talking about. And I think number 17 was Venezuela. You can check. Yep. It was down in the high teens as far as, the first, second, third. It was one of the minor ones. And initially, when he talked about Venezuela, he was only talking about drugs, and the boats he was blowing up, they were drug boats. And now he's talking about, they sent a bunch of their prisoners and their mental people. Well, you know what? Almost every country in Central America where they had people coming up, those people were coming through. So he's picking on Venezuela. Why? He's avoiding the elephant in the room. Why would we care about Venezuela? Why did we try to run a coup on Venezuela? How many times? But I'm thinking of the one where they had the guy that was a friend of our current Secretary of State. You remember the guy? We named him
Juan Guaido.
Who is it? Yeah, that guy. So, yeah, and I guess he's disappeared or he's in college now. I don't know what he's doing. But anyway, we had this guy, this is the real president of Venezuela. We're going to run this. And that was also obviously CIA involvement there. So we've been on Venezuela's case for a long time about all kinds of things, whether it's politics, now it's the immigration or the illegal immigration and the drugs, which the drugs is a non-starter, quite frankly. Immigration, you could make a case, but, we're not doing that to all the other countries. They're not number one in that either. So what the real issue is as the whole world knows, okay, and Americans know if they open their eyes, and most Americans actually know this. The issue is Venezuela sits on top of the number one oil reserves on the planet, bigger than what's left in Saudi Arabia, bigger than anything we've discovered recently. And it's available to get. Some of it's probably offshore deep water, but we know how to get deep water oil out. So he wants that resource. And it's really like a kind of an echo of his, I say only 6 months ago. It seems like 10 years. But 6 months ago, when Trump entered the White House for the second time, first thing he wanted to do was get Greenland. Why did he want Greenland? Well, rare earths, energy and trade access control of the Arctic, a resource, geographical and war fundamental resource state. So he says, we're going to get Greenland. Okay. So Greenland's very tiny. And of course, Denmark is a European country that owns, quote unquote, Greenland. So, that was a little bit of some political talk back and forth. So, but what is he looking for? Trump hasn't changed his agenda. His agenda is to take whatever he can take. And I think Venezuela has been on the list for a long time. Yep. And this is totally wrong. The Congress should be involved in this. It is an act of war that he has done with these boats that he shot out of the water. And also, if any other country had done something like that, except Israel. Israel does that, right? They went to Tunisia and they gathered up all these boats in international water, the latest, both flotillas that tried to come to Gaza. So Israel gets away with it, but Israel's a tiny little country, special case, But any other country on the planet who did what Trump has been doing over the past month in Venezuela, just in terms of blowing boats out of the water without cause, not arresting them, not taking them in, not checking out to see, but just blowing them up, killing the people. That's totally illegal. Why is he able to do that? Well, the Congress has got no spine, and the Congress is run by people, unfortunately, who don't care. And I don't care which party it is, they don't care. Both parties are really, they're so pro-Israel. That's their only foreign policy concern, is to take care of Israel. So Venezuela is not Israel. Venezuela is a backwater compared to Israel. Israel, we focus on that. But what they're not focusing on, of course, and we see this here, is the Constitution. There are limits to power. There are limits to executive power. There are roles that are laid out very clearly. And when it comes to war and defense, the president is the actor, but the Congress declares war. And of course, They haven't done their job for 70 years. They have not declared war since World War II. Why is that? Well, it's a good question. Americans should be very concerned about the fact that our government could care less about the Constitution. And that's what we see here. But you would think it'd be easy to stop Trump because he's lying, number one. I don't know how much truth he's saying, but certainly the drug excuse for Venezuela. That is a lie. That is a provable lie. That is not the issue. Okay, so he ought to be called out on that. Where's the media? I mean, I looked on Wikipedia, which is run by the CIA, and it said Venezuela is not the primary source of drugs. It's not even close. It's number 17.
Yeah,
So
it's not the drugs.
So
It's
when he
obviously
says
not
that
the drugs.
we're going after the drugs, then he's provably lying, and any media person could ask him that question, but they don't. And of course, obviously, we know what Hegseth did, right? Hegseth blocked he said, if you're going to not sign a loyalty oath to the Pentagon, we're not going to let the media come in and be as part of our press corps. And, that's personally, that's not a bad thing, because the media needs a slap in the face. They need a good cold slap in the face, so they realize they are not part of the government team. They are adversaries to the government team. That's the media's role. It's the fourth estate. It's the balance. They are supposed to be adversaries. They should be seeking out every, leak they can possibly find and running down the data. That's what they need to be doing. That's media's job. So I'm kind of glad Hegseth did this, because it kind of reminds the good journalism, which there isn't very much of. Us all independent now, but that reminds them what their job is. So that part's good. But again, Trump he's always been a storyteller. He's always been someone who exaggerates. Even, you remember in his campaigns, some of the wonderful stories that he told on the campaign trail, just full of imagination, right? And I think people found that endearing. At least the people that supported Trump found it endearing. But now that he's president, he's continuing on with making up stories that aren't true. And and I'm sure he would get very upset if anyone suggested to him, well, clearly you're going after Venezuela's oil. You have a burr in your saddle about Maduro, and you see an opportunity. He sees an opportunity. And none of that has to do with being a peace president. So, I'm sorry. I want to say one more thing about Venezuela. So Trump was lobbying publicly, right? We could see lobbying publicly for the Nobel Peace Prize, which he did not get. But the person who got it was, of course, the next
lunatic.
It's a person that we kind of have been working with very much, just like we were the other person we tried to put in to be the new Venezuelan president. And Machado has very much sold out. Well, she wants power, which sure, politicians want power. She wants power, but the way she intends to get power is have the U.S. back her, which we are doing, in order to trade Venezuelans' natural resources and business opportunities, not to the highest bidder or not to the best, not to Venezuelan companies, certainly. And I think a lot of the Venezuelan companies are in bad shape, but solely to America. He's like, well, you know what, America, Washington, if you will put me in power, you will get all this stuff back. Now, how often have we seen that before, all over the place? And so this is what, and all of a sudden they said 17 or 15, 24 hours before they made the decision, or maybe it was after they'd made the decision on the Nobel Peace Prize, the committee, the betting, how they have online betting, like to predict what's going to happen. All of a sudden there was a huge spike. Oh, it's going to be Machado. It's going to be Machado, which tells me Washington knew it was going to be Machado. They were secretly lobbying for her, because that's the next best thing for Trump getting it, to put her up as somehow a peace candidate. And also, she's probably, honestly, less qualified for the Peace Prize than Trump is. And we know Trump's not qualified for it. So anyway, crazy stuff's going on. And we are just as deep in the intrigue there as we have been in the 60s. It's almost like we're going back to the 60s with the rise of the CIA and the rise of, hitting, picking and choosing the world's leaders. I don't know how we got there, but we went back to the future. We're in the past, really, and it's a refreshed, high-tech, computer AI aided CIA control of things. Oops, I lost my person. Well, anyway, I'll keep talking, I guess, since we're still rolling. But Yeah, Trump has really surprised a lot of people, I think, who didn't really know him well, but thought that he was going to bring peace and putting America first. So the internet has gone down on his end, so he's coming back. But yeah, it's very interesting what we're seeing, and I think it doesn't take a lot of knowledge of history, recent history, or the history from 60 years ago, 70 years ago, to see the similarities of what Trump is doing, which means Trump did not bring to us a new era, which he promised. Still waiting for the internet to come back up on his end. Oh, 2 people. Good.
Okay.
Are you back? Okay, sorry. I kept talking for a while. I'm sorry.
No. Thank you for talking. My
Talked
signal
a little bit. There was some gap.
My internet signal is trash today. I don't know what is going on. This thing is supposed to be 200.
Yeah, it happens sometimes.
Yeah, it's very weird. Well, and it may be weird is not the right word for it. It's just the way U.S. policy is, where they just fundamentally agree with what Donald Trump is doing. Also, it is very strange for Donald Trump to out the CIA. The CIA is supposed to work in the secrets. It's supposed to be, this is, the people that lurch in the darkness. And he's like, by the way, I'm sitting in the CIA.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that just the threat? Or
no, the CIA has been operating already, and he got briefed apparently of what it was doing, and it was probably a very interesting briefing, and so it was on his mind, and he blurted it out. I call him, he's the blurtmeister. He really says all kinds of things that he's not supposed to say, because he is a person, and I sympathize with him in the sense that he talks things out in order to understand things. Like how we learn. He's a talker, and as he talks, he learns. He convinces himself. He finds himself in a pathway that his words have led him. Meanwhile, everybody's listening to what he says, and they're like, "What are you doing?" He's speaking to help himself think, and that's a way that a lot of people are like that. Other people, have to write it out, and other people are gifted with the ability to just say words that are good and solid, and they've thought about them. That's great, but oftentimes we're not like that. So Trump has to talk. He's a talker. So
yeah, but the problem is
in talking through what he knows and what he was briefed, the CIA was big in one of his latest briefings. He probably asked, "What are we doing? Who do we have there?" Not so much who do we have, but what do we have there that CIA is controlling? What projects are you doing? What does it look like for Machado? Right? Because we're obviously backing Machado. Who would be backing Machado? The CIA. The funding got frozen for the other organization early on that was doing all the CIA stuff. But do we still have money going to Machado through CIA, through defense accounts? Of course we do. Of course we do. The CIA is running that, and they've been running that. So she just won the Nobel Peace Prize, and I imagine that Trump had heard her name before, I'm sure, but he's heard a lot of stuff. He's 80 years old. He's very competent to take in stuff, but he is getting fire hosed by everything he's got himself into. I mean, there's no time to really rest and reflect. So Machado got the Nobel Peace Prize. So he had to write up a congratulation thing for Machado. Who's this Machado? Right? Remind me who Machado is. And they tell him, yeah, we're the CIA. We're working with her to overthrow Maduro. We think this is a good bet. CIA's given him this story. Trump likes it. Very interesting. It's on his mind. So he blurts it out. Yeah, I've sent the CIA down. Well, first off, the CIA's been there probably under Biden. I wouldn't suspect. I don't think Trump, said, as soon as he took, let's see where we can put the CIA. No, the CIA's been working in Venezuela for a long time. We know this because of the previous coup attempts. It's not like we go in and completely leave. I mean, we want to take over. I mean, the oil alone is justification for our government to do whatever it wants with other countries. We don't, we say Trump is insensitive to Gazans. He doesn't care about Gazan life. Well, that's true, but there's not much in Gaza that we're going to get, right? I mean, Israel's going to take the oil fields. Hopefully they'll put all the rest of the Gazans back in a camp of some sort. This is the Israeli goal if they can't kill them all. But that doesn't really impact America directly. But what we're doing in Venezuela, there's literally trillions of dollars worth of energy reserves there. If the U.S. could control and exploit that as kind of a Western Hemisphere energy resource, that's huge. And think about this, and we have to think about the petrodollar. Most of our wars, we big thing, we say our wars in the Middle East, it was about supporting Israel, greater Israel expansion. Yeah, sure, that's a big part of it. That is no doubt a convincing factor. But the other factor is, and it's very easy to kind of show, is the support of the petrodollar, basically the trade of oil in using the dollar. And if you look at Iraq, second invasion of Iraq, we go in there. What did Saddam Hussein do in December or November of 2002? Or maybe even earlier than that, maybe in this late summer, he went off of the gold. He went off the petrodollar, and he said, "I'm selling oil, but I'm not selling it in dollars. I'll sell in whatever currency that you have, whether it's whatever, whoever wants to buy, use your own currency. We're not going to wash it through the dollar." So he said that, immediately taken out. The very first executive order, George Bush, 43 Bush, George W. did after we came into Baghdad and took over, the first executive order had to do with putting all of Iraq's oil exports back to be traded on the dollar. That was the first thing we did. Then you think about Libya. Libya was a huge example of a country that has oil, not an exceptional amount, but it had oil, and they were trading it off the dollar. They said, we're not going to use the dollar. In fact, Gaddafi, if you remember, was pushing for a gold-backed African currency. Right. And he had actually minted gold, gold coin, not so much that people would use day to day, but a gold coin it would be a gold-backed currency. And it was very popular because obviously Africa has gold that many of the countries there could have participated pretty well, and that would have been an attractive alternative to the dollar for a lot of resource trade. So we go in and we dragged Gaddafi. Basically, Hillary Clinton went in and did that duty, dragged Gaddafi through the street and humiliated him. And now, of course, Libya is back on the dollar to the extent that oil is being exported by American and European countries on the dollar. That was the goal. So fundamentally, when you look at these things, it's not about, it's not really about God's chosen people in Israel and they want to do what they're wanting to do. It is about fundamental resource control, which is what not capitalism. I disagree that that's a capitalism fault, but it is blamed for that. But it's certainly imperial. It's an imperial pattern, right? I mean, what do you have an empire for? You have an empire so you can go rape everybody else's resources and bring them home and enrich yourselves. I mean, that's what they do. So
that is the capitalistic impulse, right?
It is.
How do we maximize profit?
I like to separate state capitalism, which I see is associated with imperialism, with actual free market and free trade. I
hear you.
I do, because you really, to make what we see an elimination of real competition at the highest levels. We have corporate industries. And actually, this is another one where Trump's going hog wild, right? I mean, what is he doing? Buying up Intel, he's buying up some companies with federal dollars. With our tax dollars, he is investing in and buying shares of resource manufacturers and industries in order to strengthen the state, not to strengthen people, not to enrich Americans, not to make our lives better, but to strengthen the state. And really, I always get mad when the left says, "Oh, Trump's a fascist," and I'm like, "Well, actually, he's behaving and he's acting in the way that any good fascist leader would react, in taking charge of major fundamental industries and sectors with the government." That's what you say. That's what he's doing.
But isn't the difference just one is schoolboy and one is grown up? Both are the same person. Like any of those companies, let's say you have Random Company. Random Company creates a product. Random Company sells that product.
Yeah.
Random Company starts to grow. Well, the random company is also going to, at some point, say, hey, I can put money into the political space because that allows me to
Sure.
get
Well,
X, Y.
exactly. Which is why I like to identify as an anarcho-capitalist. I don't like the state at all, because if you have a state, now, people who love the state, they say the state can do many wonderful things, and it certainly can do many wonderful things. But it seems like always the first, second, and third things that it does is trade favors for big industry. Or, I mean, isn't it what that does? So I'm opposed to the state. I think the state's the problem. If and you can imagine though too, if the government didn't hold sway over all these advantages that it can bestow, if it didn't have money it could invest in this district over a different district, congressional district, or things like that, then a lot of this stuff wouldn't be happening. For example, the military-industrial complex. How do they build aircraft carriers? Well, they make sure that they're producing parts in every one of the 435 districts. They make sure of that, even if that doesn't make sense. Maybe it doesn't make sense to have a certain type of factory in a certain geographical area, but they did it so they could make sure they owned that congressperson, because that congressperson is not going to vote against the aircraft carrier because he's only got 750,000 people, and 50,000 of them depend on what the government is doing in their district in support of that aircraft carrier. So it's a trading of favors. And if you have a government that's smaller and not as wealthy and not as able to, now you could say, well, what if our government didn't do war and it took care of our country? Good. But when you take care of the country, it's not high profit, right? Think about healthcare. The biggest thing that we need in healthcare, we need science. That costs a little bit, but we also need people taking care of people, right? Especially if your population ages. In Japan, they use robots for this, right? Because they don't have people to take care of people.
Do they? Are you serious? They use robots?
They have robots. A lot of the robotics are applied in taking care of geriatric patients, older people who need assistance. Oh yeah, it's amazing. Now, we're not Japan, and we're not as geriatric as Japan, but healthcare is people talking to people caring for people. Think about therapy, right? You can use AI for therapy if you're crazy, but I don't mean crazy, but like AI will make you crazy. I think I'm not sure I would use AI for therapy, but
there's something you need people for. Human contact.
You really do need people for. And when you take a lot of people's time and you do things like that, it's really not a big profit, right? It's you can make a living doing it, but it's not like super big profit for a big company. And it doesn't require large buildings. It doesn't require the building of things that you purposely destroy so you can build more of. It doesn't require that. And that's where the money is in war, and purposing building lots of expensive items that you then just throw in the garbage, basically. Well, you destroy other people's country with it, but it's broken. When you get it back, it's broken. You say, oh, we have to build a new thing, right? We need more money. And the state provides that. So to me, the state is the problem, but I'm sure I'm much closer in my views to the far left in some ways, in terms
of that, yes.
In some ways.
But I beyond the state, though, planned obsolescence.
I hold the state more responsible. I hold politicians, and also, if you look at who our politicians are, not just in this country, but I don't care what country it is. They've done studies. Sociopaths.
Sociopaths, right?
They're far more represented, because think about who wants to be in charge of other people, right? Not everybody wants to be in charge of other people. But the people who really love power over other people are a certain category of people. They really like it. And you rarely find people that are leading large groups that don't. Now, Gandhi, right? Gandhi didn't love power. He led through his example, and he led lots of people. Of course, what did he oppose? People that had power. Martin Luther King, he was pretty good for a long time, really opposing the powers that be, for the people, and being, and kind of living the kind of life that he, that was a model for people. I'm not saying, some of the things he did were a model, but he didn't try to enrich himself over what he was doing. He cared about the people. He believed in what he was doing. And I think we have people like that in government, but we don't have many like that in government. Mostly what we have in government are people that are enriching themselves at our expense.
Yeah, I don't know any. I agree with you with the sociopaths thing. But that is a system though that incentivizes certain behaviors as opposed to other behaviors.
Yeah.
Planned obsolescence is a really good example. You have a laptop. That laptop dies within a couple of years because they need you to buy another laptop. You have a cell phone that dies in a couple of, meaning even food. I mean, the U.S. Wastes 50% of the food that it makes. Like we have this is a systemic ideological thing that we have.
It is, and I'm gonna tell you why I also blame the state on this. The Federal Reserve, which is quasi-public, quasi-private.
Yes.
It's private when it needs to be private. It's public when it needs to have some public support, whatever. So it's not in the Constitution. We have this Federal Reserve Bank, but what it does is it works with the Treasury to create money, right? To just create money. We know it creates money. It doesn't print the dollars, but effectively it provides money that the government can borrow, that anybody can borrow, that people can borrow. And we say, oh, planned obsolescence. Yeah, that's pretty rotten. And we've seen it. I mean, my God, I've gone through I don't know how many dishwashers. And I don't even wash dishes with the dishwasher, but they don't last like they used to. My mother has a stove, and everybody who has a mother who's in her 80s probably is working with her stove that still works from 35 years ago.
Yes. That thing lasts forever.
But I don't have that. I don't have that because we don't get that. We're not. But I think part of what drives that is the inflationary growth of dollars in our society and in other wealthy societies, relatively wealthy, because our society isn't really that wealthy. We have wealthy sectors of our society. Most of our society is not wealthy, but the inflationary pressures that are created on purpose to allow the government to borrow money, mainly for war, right? Because usually governments don't borrow money for any national projects except war. War is the big emergency. War is the one, oh, we got to fight. We're going to die if we don't do this. So, but inflation, the creation of money that the government can use drives this inflation. You know, we know our money since 1913, 1914, when we first had the Federal Reserve, the money supply increased, but the loss of purchasing power of the dollar has really been down. I think it's down at this point to 1% of what it was before. So
it is dramatic.
It doesn't buy what it used to buy. But when money is cheap, because that's what they've done, they've cheapened the dollar. But when money is cheap, everything else is cheap. Because money's cheap, right? Well, I'll just go buy a new phone. How much does it cost me? You know, not much, relative. And so you can't just say, well, capitalism is seeking to, ruin its customer base and make them more poor by buying all this stuff. No, I'm not saying you're saying that, but they are reacting to something that's beyond its own control, which is the weakening of our dollar, not weakening, but the wasting of our dollar, the loss of purchasing power. So it's just, money's not.
But they just want to maximize their profit. Even if the dollar had the
no matter
exact same value, they would still want to maximize their profit.
Absolutely.
It's like, how much do you want? It's like more.
Also,
the number is just more.
That's right. They do want more. And also what we see, and we're seeing it more obviously now, but it's been going on for really forever. But the people who have access to cash money, even though it's depleted in value, and they have assets, they get more assets and more cash. Look at who's the richest guy from Omaha? Buffett, Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett,
right? So Warren Buffett is sitting on more cash than he's ever sat on ever. He's sold stuff he doesn't want to sell, and he's sitting on cash. But what is he looking for? He's looking to buy cheap assets when they come available. And that's what he's been doing, and that's what he's still doing. So what happens with the government creating money for political purposes to help the government borrow cheaply, and of course we all borrow cheaply when the government borrows cheaply, but not as cheaply as the government. They get first dibs on cheap money. But as that goes on and on, you end up creating massive bubbles. People aren't getting the right signals as what you should invest in, what you should not invest in. We end up all getting poor because purchasing power for 98% of the people is much lower than it was. In the 70s, one income family could support 2 kids in a car and a house. And today, one income family can't support 1 kid. In fact, sometimes 2 income families don't support any kids. They only support the 2 people that are working. So it's very a different kind of society. And it's an enslavement, really. We are becoming people without choices.
You have my agreement on that one. You have my perfect
So we're
agreement on
becoming
that.
people without choices. And this, of course, is very dangerous, right? Because when people don't have choices, they
Revolution.
do what they have to do. And what they have to do may be some very bad things. It could be, I mean, this is how revolutions start. You know, this is how all kinds of terrible things happen. And I say terrible. We can't. Is it more terrible to have a bad government? I mean, the Constitution, the preamble says, or is that the Declaration of Independence says that when your government ceases to work for you, when it is no longer responsive to the people, when it doesn't work, it's not, doesn't care about you, when it isn't, we can overthrow that government. And this idea came long before Jefferson, who wrote that down. I mean, this was the thinking in England. This was the thinking everywhere. They said, you know what, we have a right to a government that serves us, not a government that exists to enrich itself. So we're getting close. We're getting close to.
It's a human thing. Like, and I know they governments have a vested interest in trying to deter people from that sort of thought, right? They need to be the single distribution of force vector in a particular society.
That's right.
But you're absolutely right. A government is not a magical thing. It's there in order to deal with the practical realities of life.
That's right.
And at a certain point, yeah, when it can't do that, something else needs to take its place. And we are close. There's a book. I want to move on to the next issue, but there's a book called End Times by Peter Turchin. You will love it.
Okay.
You will love that book because he breaks this down in a scientific way, looking back over the course of like thousands of years and how societies, he calls it an overproduction of the elites, where you get too many. He's like, the issue is not the number of poor you have in a country. The issue is the number of elites you have in a country, the resources that they suck for themselves, the immiseration of the working class and the poor as they pull those resources. And you get this kind of ossified system that no longer has the capability of moving. And you get these wannabe elites who can't get into the various aspects of the elite. And he points out these are the most dangerous people on the planet, because those people are going to use the poor, the middle class, the people who they've been screwed over for all of those years to effectively overturn the government.
Yeah.
Every 200 to 400 years.
I think there's a lot to that. And there's other writers too that talk about hyper complex systems, you know, that are very, we use the word ossified, and that is exactly what is happening. Our systems are so complex. And this is not just our political system. It's very complex. I mean, because look, we elect people, we elect this guy, that guy. What happens? No change.
Nothing.
Continue with war, continue with the same thing. And they say, oh, it's a big ship, it's hard to steer. That's not it. It's so complicated that it is locked into a certain pathway and it cannot change from that. But this is what happens with systems get very complex. And also you think about our power system in this country, you know, we have how many time zones, you know, 4 big time zones over the continent. And we get a power problem. It can affect a third of the country. You know, it can be, you know, it's still, everything's connected. It's very complex, and we don't know how to, we're locked into that complexity. So it makes it highly vulnerable, which again, the political system, I think, is vulnerable to this. I'll have to read that End Times.
It's really good. Peter Turchin, the book is really good. I tried to get him on the show. He didn't want to come, but he's really good. The other thing I wanted to hit with you, what time is it? It is, okay. The other thing I wanted to hit with you has to do with, I guess there's 2 parts. One, Financial Times is effectively saying it seems that the Tomahawks will be going to Ukraine, that the U.S. is going to use contractors or people pretending to be contractors to fire those directly at Russia. It seems that the targets have already been determined. So I think, and give me your take on this, it started off as this kind of trial balloon. How is Russia going to respond to us firing missiles at Russia? Putin's response was somewhat muted. It was like, this is going to change our relationship. But then you get Sergei Lavrov in a recent interview saying, hey, what's going on with the Tomahawks is separate from the Alaska process that is still in operation. Effectively saying these are 2 different tracks. Now, that wasn't Putin's response the first time around when Biden brought this up. His response was like, this is a red line. And they've apparently have backed off this red line to, well, I mean, our air defense, this is an old missile. You know, it may hit a few targets, but all things being equal, it's not going to change anything on the ground. I think that's a problematic take. And the reason, now let me get your take on this. The reason why I think it's problematic is because On some level, militaries, governments rely on seriousness, meaning for people to take you at your word when you say stuff. Not like Trump. Trump is a bitch liar. But if Putin says, if you put troops into Ukraine, those people are going to die. Now, if Europe believes that, they won't put troops into Ukraine. If Europe doesn't believe that, they will put troops into Ukraine, regardless of whether what's true.
Mhm.
So it's like your word on some level has to matter in order for the next word to matter.
Yeah.
And up to this point, they've taken everything that Putin has done that's pragmatic as weakness. And my fear on this is that they're going to do the exact same thing with this. See, we knew he wasn't serious, which means at some point he will be serious, and we will all be in a world of hurt.
Oh yeah, I
Give me your
can't.
take on this.
Yeah, I don't understand why the United States, why why Trump is having a hard time understanding where Putin is coming from. I don't understand why he can't take Putin at his word, and really look at Putin's. You can look at Putin. He's run that country for quite a long time, right? We have evidence of how he thinks and operates and what he says, and there's a remarkable consistency in Putin's objectives and his words and where he stands throughout that time frame that he's been in charge of Russia. And of course, he led Russia really from a very difficult time. The post breakup of the Soviet Union. It went through some terrible times. So he's a person who has some experience with difficult things, and he speaks honestly. He speaks openly. He's not. You never can catch Putin saying one thing to one group and another thing to another group. You don't have that. So I don't know why they don't understand it. The only thing I can figure is our intelligence is not either it's not very good, which is very possible, or the intelligence isn't getting to Trump. Trump is surrounded by people that have an objective that's very different than what intelligence would advise him to do vis-a-vis Russia or Ukraine. And the other thing is, I believe everything with him is transactional and it's business. And he may be just trying to, just like we did with the bad Patriots, or Patriots are not that good, right? Older technology. We sent Patriots to Ukraine, and of course they were messed up. They were destroyed. They didn't really last very long, and we eliminated them. This is the military industrial process, right? We build things to get destroyed so then we can justify building new and more expensive things. It's possible that they want those Tomahawks to be destroyed, and it's like they may be looking at it. Trump may be looking at it, or his people, or whatever. Well, he'll think we're serious if we send Tomahawks. We don't have any faith that these Tomahawks will actually end up being launched anywhere. And the test of this would be, will Poland host the Tomahawks? Will Romania, we have a base in Romania, will that host the Tomahawks? And Romania will launch Tomahawks against Russia? No.
Oh, I see.
No intention of doing that because they know what will happen. But Ukraine, it's like, well, it's mostly wasted. It's a big exercise for military technology. See what happens. I wouldn't put it past Trump to say, well, if this is one of our options, let's see what happens. And if we lose the Tomahawks, if they're destroyed, like the F-16s, remember we sent F-16s, that was a huge game changer. And first off, they had to hide them because they were targets on the ground in Ukraine. And they had couple of wrecks that they said it wasn't the Russians, but pretty much they don't fly the F-16. The F-16s that were given to Ukraine are gone or permanently grounded. They're not being used. So they may think, that's evidence. You send any kind of older equipment or any type of strategic weapon to Ukraine, it will be destroyed. If we destroy these old Tomahawks, that gives us a military industrial incentive at home here to spend more of that $1 trillion that Trump gave to the Pentagon. I wouldn't put it past them to sacrifice the Ukrainian, what's left of their state and what's left of the Ukrainian people. I would not put it past Trump to sacrifice them on the altar of what he wants to do, in the Western Hemisphere, to be the god of the Western Hemisphere. He would say, just like he sacrificed the Gazans. The very fact that you have Trump on that panel of peace deciders in Gaza.
And that criminal Tony Blair. Yep.
Well, the criminal Tony Blair, criminal Netanyahu, and criminal Trump. But Trump's weapons and look, we mark our weapons. They know what American weapons are. the Israelis use American weapons. And we've, for years, for 30 and 40 years, we see pictures of American weapons fired on Palestinian targets. Okay. So Gaza has been destroyed by American weapons, primarily American made weapons. And they've known this from day one. So this idea that we're going to have peace after all, by the same guy that's been providing all the weapons that have been put on Gaza, it makes no sense. And so this is the world that Trump lives in. He does not care as president. I'm not saying what he cares as an individual person. He doesn't seem very conflicted, but I'll withhold judgment on how he feels as an individual person. But as president, he could care less about people in war zones. He really could care less about them. It is trumped by his bigger interest, which is to create this massive military, clearly, even though that's not what he said he was going to do, but that is what they want to do, because there's a lot of money churning around DC that is, and the country, you know, our military industrial complex is a major part of our economy.
Right.
So he wants to do that, and he doesn't really care what happens, because I'm telling you, tomahawks, Putin has been clear what will happen to them. And if any one of them are used, he's very clear on what would happen to Ukraine or any other country that launched.
Fires them off.
This is
Well,
war.
they're basically saying they're going to use contractors. So, I mean, they are not even talking about training Ukrainians. So their thought is
exactly. So they're American. So this is a war against Russia, which we knew it was. It was a NATO war against Russia, and NATO, of course, is a big part of America. It was a U.S. war against Russia,
Right.
a play war, kind of a deceitful war. Let's see what happens. You know, it's time to compress Russia even further. We've been wanting to do that forever, because after the Cold War, what did the military industrial complex have? They had nothing. They were supposed to shrink. NATO was supposed to go away, but it didn't. So this is a false construct, really. It's an organization with no mission, trying to create one. And again, going back to the Federal Reserve, cheap money that the government can borrow, that can create out of thin air, funds all of this war making, right? So they don't have to go to the American taxpayer and say, well, we've got this war, you're going to have to, cut back. And then think about asking, 70% of the population in this country to cut back, because they have already cut back. They have already reduced their consumption. They're trying to survive, really. I mean, with the lack of purchasing power, but the government has plenty of purchasing power, because they get the first money that's basically created, and they're using it for these purposes. So I don't know.
I think they do have an objective. They want primacy. I mean, and for Trump, I think what he's trying to do is get leverage. Like, I think Trump recognizes he is confronted with two very big problems, neither of which does he have control over: China and Russia. China in an economic sense, Russia in a military sense.
Yeah.
And so when he's hitting oil fields, when he's trying to get India to not use Russian oil, meaning these are a president looking for power, looking for leverage, because he realizes in the context of this war, he has none. And so this tomahawk seems to be the new wonder weapon, as the Germans used to call it, of trying to do something. But even Financial Times points out, well, they only have 50 that they can offer. They've only requisitioned a few, like a very tiny mini amount for like the next year.
Yeah.
And they have no expectation that these weapons are going to do anything materially in regards to the context of the war.
Yeah.
It's a weapon from the 80s.
Yes.
That Russia has been preparing for. Yeah. And so it's very strange, but I don't see how this is going to give him the leverage that he needs. What it will do is, let's say, normalize America attacking Russia directly, something that used to be a taboo.
Well, I don't know how they're going to normalize that, because I think there will be a response that's that isn't something Americans are going to appreciate. I mean, it's a risky game that he's playing to do this. There's a lot of risk there. But yeah, Trump is trying to have American primacy. But our primacy in the past was based on our money being the international currency of choice. And our money is no good anymore. It's not reliable. We keep printing it. This always happens to empires. We make money, we devalue our money, and after a while, people decide this isn't really my best choice. I'm going to do something else. And this is obviously the rise of BRICS. The other thing Trump does, and this is because he, his tariffs and his trade punishments that he hands out to everybody. This is very much a fascist type of idea in terms of economics. It is not free market economics, but there's a free market guy back from the 1800s, French guy, Bastiat was his name. And he's credited with saying that when goods cannot cross borders, armies will. And his point was that peace in the world is going to be engendered through free trade, free and active trade, and this obviously, it's a capitalistic view from the 1800s, free trade. Right. It's anti-imperialism in the sense that we have, traders are equal, right? If you buy something on Facebook Marketplace, right, you're getting something you want for a price that you agree on, and the person selling it is getting rid of something they wanted to get rid of at a price that they're happy with. It's a happy thing, right? I mean, you don't go and go, I met this guy in the parking lot, I got something from Facebook, and boy, I really didn't want to do that. I think I paid too much. No, you paid what you wanted to pay. You're excited about your new acquisition, and the other guy's happy to get rid of it for whatever you paid him. It's an agreeable thing. It creates a neighborhood, in a sense, a global neighborhood. And Trump is doing everything he possibly can to destroy that global neighborhood of trade. He believes that everybody wants what we have, which they don't. They might have 50 years ago. They don't now. And he believes that war and trade tariffs are interrelated. That's a form of power. And he has this fantasy about military action that many people do have that have not been in the military. The idea that military, CIA, these are such powerful tools. They will really, I can get what I want using CIA and military. And in fact, you cannot get what you want. What you usually get, and we have many books and congressional hearings and everything else to show what we usually get when we use the military and the CIA to get something is the opposite of what we want. It's the unintended consequence. It's the screw ups. In fact, I was just looking at something about from back in the 60s where the CIA had to explain to Congress back in the 60s that they accidentally conducted a coup in the wrong country because somebody got their wires crossed.
Are you serious?
No, I'm not kidding. It's for real. I didn't know about it. But yeah, so this is what you get when you use those tools. And people like, John Kiriakis, who's a CIA whistleblower, spent time in jail. They went after him hard. He's brilliant. Tells a lot of great stories. But people like him who know the CIA, who worked in the CIA for most of a career, people in the military who have worked and seen how the military actually operates and how it actually makes its decisions and functions in today's world. These are people who would never choose to put the military and the CIA out there to solve your problem because they know that's your worst tool. That's your bad tool. It is not very reliable. It's very expensive. There's a lot of potential for unintended consequences, including blowback, which is, of course, again and again and again. So, but Trump didn't serve in the military, and he's not surrounded by people who served in the military. And even, say Pete Hegseth, okay, he was in the military for 10 years or something as an operator. This perspective that he has is a fantasy of what the military can do. It's a fantasy of what he thinks the military can be, the way it's organized and the way it is today. It is really not effective. It's just not. So Trump hasn't made he thinks he has tools that work a certain way that they don't. Nobody's telling him differently. He thinks he's dealing with a world that he's actually not dealing with. He thinks Putin can be manipulated. No, not going to happen. All evidence is to the contrary. He thinks that China, he views China, Xi in China has been in charge almost 20 years, maybe more, long time. He's overstayed his welcome in some ways, because he's continued to be the head of China. And they think, China they'll really fall apart when they get a new leader. No, they won't. No, they won't. Their system is more stable than ours is right now. So, but Trump doesn't see this. He thinks that we in the United States, what he is presiding over is maybe what it was, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And he wants to this is what always bothered me about MAGA. He says, make America great. I'm okay with that. I'm okay as an American. Okay, I can buy that again. And then he goes again. And I'm like, what again are you talking about? because there are many eras of our history that if we pick that one, like Teddy Roosevelt floating the white fleet around the world to tell everybody how powerful our Navy was. And
Right.
it was an old Navy painted, freshly painted. You know, he did this. Teddy, is that the great that he's talking about? Is it kind of our late entry into World War II at the end? And we took all the credit for winning that war when really it was Russia that
Right.
did it and the people in Europe that did it. Is that the great that he's talking about? You know, I don't know what he's referring to. And this is a problem I have with Make America Great Again, because I don't know what he's talking about. I would like to go back to probably the mid 1800s, maybe at the very beginning, maybe 1791. I don't know, when we had a constitution that people agreed with and followed, at least for a year or two, they followed it. That would be my thing. But I don't think Trump agrees with that. I think he is envisioning something else that really never existed, like he thinks it did. And this is a problem. But again, what other president have we had recently, or could we have, that understands American history, that understands trade, that understands how money works? And if you degrade your currency and you're a global power and everybody loves the dollar, and you start chipping away at the value of that dollar and you start cutting trade with everybody, so why would they want to trade on your currency? Because you're being a bitch about it. You know, you're penalizing people. You're changing your mind every day, right? You're hurting your country. That doesn't make America great again. That diminishes America. So I don't know what he's thinking. I don't know what.
Yeah, that's the
opposite. It's really been a huge disappointment for sure. Although, because he blurts out everything, we Americans can become wiser, because Trump does tell us what he's doing. We don't know why he's doing it, and we may never know. But at least he tells us. Yeah, I sent the CIA to Venezuela. We're going to do something down there. What? Well, at least he told us, right? We didn't have to find out. Like, you know, when they killed the leader in the Congo there. What was his name?
It's not Lumumba. It's
Patrice Lumumba. Yeah.
Okay.
But we killed him in the backseat of a car. CIA went and killed him. I think they poisoned him or something. Anyway, we got rid of him. The CIA did. He was a populist leader, right? Obviously, we don't take anybody that's going to be independent of our colonialism. So they killed him, and we didn't find out. The American people didn't find out until 70s, when they had those Hamilton and some of there was a big set of hearings on CIA activities in 73, I think it was. So they produced a lot of exposure of what the CIA had been doing in the previous decade. And Patrice Lumumba's assassination was one of those things. But at the time it was happening, we had no idea. People were like, what? We have CIA in Congo? You know, they didn't know. So at least Trump's telling us. He's got the CIA in Venezuela. We've picked our leader. She's a Nobel Peace Prize winner, Mrs. Machado. And she's going to let the U.S. have all the oil in Venezuela. At least he's telling us that it's what he's doing. But American people are going to wake up. This country.
I mean, they don't. America seems anesthetized. The last one I wanted to get you on, and could be the last question.
Okay.
Is this deal going to last? And I'm asking this question knowing full well that Israel has already violated the deal.
Yeah, they've.
You have Palestinians that have already been killed. You have Israel deciding to cut the amount of aid that's on those trucks.
Well, they haven't delivered. I don't think any aid's been delivered, and they're stopping it already. Yeah, so it's like backed up at the border, and they're not letting it through. Yeah,
Listen to Trump on this, because Trump mentions this. They ask him about this. And notice the we that he uses when he's discussing this.
Absolutely, they're looking. So we have the living hostages all back. They returned some more today. It's a gruesome process. I almost hate to talk about it. But they're digging. They're actually digging. There are areas where they're digging and they're finding a lot of bodies. Then they have to separate the bodies. You wouldn't believe this. And some of those bodies have been in there a long time. And some of them are under rubble. They have to remove rubble. But there are graves, and some are in tunnels that died in tunnels that are way down under the earth. And the tunnels are like 3 feet. Can you believe it? 3 feet high. They lived like this for a long period of time. It's a horrible atrocity. At the same time, we, meaning Israel, but I knew everything they were doing pretty much. I knew most of the things they were doing, but they've killed probably 70,000 of these
By the way,
people,
that's a low
Hamas.
ball number.
Yes,
And I
it is.
said,
I mean, and it's the we
Yeah.
that I
No,
think
it-
is probably the most honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Trump, when he went to Israel just the other day and he spoke to the Knesset, right? He gave them this big thing. Did you watch part of that speech at all? The Knesset speech he gave last
I
week? Yeah.
did, unfortunately.
So, yeah. So, I mean, he talks about Marian Adelson in that speech. He basically says she bought me and I'm hers.
And not just, by the way, not just bought him. She even said, I asked her which country did she like the most, and she wouldn't answer. It's probably Israel.
Yeah.
So a woman who's functioning at the behest of Israel that you acknowledge
That's
has
right.
bought you.
That's right.
That's
Oh, yeah. So he blurts out the truth if you want to listen to it, but it should be humiliating for Trump. But I think he's incapable of being humiliated. But he should be humiliated by watching his own speeches because he is, in terms of Israel particularly, he is a weak tool of Israel. Or at least he appears that way. And also for him to echo the Israeli narrative about digging bodies out of the rubble. I think digging bodies out of the rubble has been a big problem for 2 years. And that rubble was created by American bombs and Israeli jets. And it is filled with Palestinians. And we haven't even begun to count those Palestinians. And I saw a newspaper article just the other day mentioning that 2 million Gazans were coming, we're trying to return to their areas as a result of the peace thing. There's not 2 million Gazans. That is a way overestimate of what's remaining in Gaza. There were 2.3 at the beginning, and they've killed probably 600,000 or 700,000. And the dying isn't over with yet because the starving is not over with yet. We've seen no aid go in. I think you have to believe Netanyahu when he speaks Hebrew, because when he speaks Hebrew and makes announcements to his people, he tells them what it is. And what it is we're not leaving Gaza, and the Gazans will continue to be eliminated and disappeared and ultimately forgotten. That is our agenda from the beginning, much earlier than October 7th, 2023. And it's what we're continuing to do. This is the mission. We're doing it. And that's what he says to. That's what he says even after he's agreed to this peace treaty, which of course, again, and Israel's not the only party guilty here in the world who signs a peace treaty and then violates it. Right? This is common, but Israel is well known for that. There has not been a single treaty or agreement that they have signed that they did not immediately begin to back away from, violate. Deny they signed it, denied they agreed with it, accuse the other party of violating it. So that's why they can do whatever they want. That's how they operate. So this is really a huge charade. And I think it only came about because Netanyahu is under pressure. And this was a way for him to get hostages back, which is the really only complaint that most Israelis have about the murder and the destruction of Gaza. We want our hostages back. That's what they cared about. That was their motivating resistance to Netanyahu's massacres and genocide. So with the hostages back, he kind of guts that argument. And there is no argument in Israel amongst the people. The vast majority want to eliminate Gazans, men, women, and child, and take over that property that has been turned into a massive wasteland, which they recognize and they don't care. So this all served Netanyahu pretty well because they've got the living hostages back. This debate about the dead is minor. That's not going to be a galvanizing political position in Israel. It's they got the living ones back, and that's what they wanted. So they're going to shut up now, and the Netanyahu government is going to continue with what they're doing. And Trump could easily stop this. He could have stopped it on day one by not sending the bombs, right?
Yes.
He could have stopped it on earlier this year when Iran was responding very effectively to Israel's attack and assassination attempts in the so-called 12-day war. Instead of swooping in to put an end to that interchange of weapons, he didn't have to do that. And that would have brought Israel to its knees, even that small amount, even though Iran did not have the upper hand. It was a surprise attack. They suffered great damage first couple of days, but they reconvened their capabilities with their missiles, and they really harmed Israel a great deal. We're still finding out today some of the damage that was done to Israel's military and intelligence facilities there.
Yes.
But Trump took a choice. Let's spend I don't know several $100 billion and go do this. We'll put a stop to this. Trump could open up the border in Gaza right now and guarantee safe food passage. We could bring our own food in. How many times have we, the United States, we boast about our logistics capacity to bring things around the world. We've helped places where they had monsoons and floods and all kinds of stuff. We're not doing anything for Gaza. Where's the American military and C-5s and whatever going in to bring stuff? No, we could do that. We absolutely could do that. He's doing nothing. Trump is doing nothing because he was a great deal. $100,000 and some APAC money. My goodness, what you can get with that, right? And this again brings me back to why I don't hate capitalism. I hate the state because capitalism is just saying, look, if I can buy a president for $100 million or $150 million in donations by a couple of rich people, what a deal, right? What a deal. Who doesn't want a deal like that, right? I would do that. If I had a couple billion, I could own the president, I would do that, or 100 million. What a deal that is. You can't fault capitalists for wanting to get a good deal, right? I mean, Americans all over, we go to thrift shops to find that good deal. We can't buy a president, but yeah.
But this is, I understand what you mean by the state being this kind of Leviathan and this Goliath.
Well, it's corrupt. It's so corrupt. And
it's corrupt. But we have a system that allows the buying of that president. Like Adelson, it was perfectly legal for her to do it.
And she's not even she's an American citizen. She's 2 passports, but for purposes of donation, I'm just an American citizen.
I'm just American. Yeah, I'm just involved in my political process. And again, it makes all the sense in the world if you have a huge amount of money for you to buy politicians in order for them to change the laws to allow you to buy them more vigorously. And then to call it speech. To say my buying you is speech.
Yeah. I mean, that was amazing. That was such an interesting ruling, which there's been rulings like that really have to be revisited. The legal, they say, well, we looked at the legal and we did this and that, but the impact of that is more of the same bad stuff that we've been getting, except a lot more rapidly. I don't know what Trump is thinking, but for him to say he act like he cares about dead bodies under rubble.
Oh, he does.
What planet is he on? He created that rubble. And it's not just a couple of Israelis that are left under there who actually seem to have been well taken care of, given if you look at what's been done to Gaza. Those guys were there. I mean, they were freaking protected. They were protected from Americans. And then the guys they give back, the Palestinians that are being released, are all beat up and scarred up. They're losing limbs and they've lost their eyes. And they unbelievable double standard. So for Trump to stand up there and do that, he's lost major credibility with a lot of people with that. I think that's the one big miscalculation that Trump did. I think Trump, his willingness to do whatever Israel wants, to take Israel's side above all. And, Trump's not a religious person. He's not a Christian Zionist, so to speak, because they're taught in Sunday school that you have to support Israel. That's something they need to unlearn. Trump never learned that. Trump likes the money and he likes the way they treat him. The Israelis treat him as the new Western, Messiah almost, who's going to save Israel. No, I mean, Trump eats that stuff up. It's a personality. It's a weakness that he has. He is so vulnerable to flattery. He's not a person who's truly interested in understanding things on a deeper level. If he's flattered, if he makes money, he's a happy man, and that's unfortunate. So Trump really has destroyed the MAGA movement, because MAGA being a populist movement, there's a lot of people who are just salt of the earth type Americans who are struggling. I mean, you don't get a bunch of independents and stuff to come out and vote for you unless they're really motivated, because a lot of times they don't vote at all. So they wanted something. And what was Trump promising them? I'm going to put America first. I'm going to put you first. I'm going to put your welfare first. And what does he do? None of that. He's done any of that. Okay. So he's destroyed his own very own movement. And I don't know if he understands that or not. But it's a big disappointment, I think, for a lot of people who thought that he was actually going to take care of the people in this country. No, he takes care of the people that live in West Jerusalem. That's the people he takes care of. The murderers.
Karen, you are great. I'm sorry that there was the internet hiccup. I don't know what's going on with the internet here. I'm going to have to try to fix it, but you are fantastic. I really appreciate you joining me. I really do. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski. She is a retired U.S. Air Force officer whose assignments included duties as Pentagon desk officer and various roles for the National Security Agency. She authored several books, including Africa Crisis Response Initiative, Past, Present, and Future, and also Expeditionary Air Operations in Africa, Challenges and Solutions. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it, okay?
Thank you, Jamal. Anytime.
You have a fantastic rest of your day. You be safe.
Okay, you too. Bye.
All right. We have reached the end. I do not know what's going on with the signal here. It started screwing up. I think it was yesterday. I'm going to have to try to unplug the Wi-Fi and see what's going on. And I don't know if I have plugs so I can plug directly into the computer, but I will work it out. Just as an announcement, I will be here until next week. After next week, I'm going to another location. So there's that. Indonesia has been a great place. I've enjoyed it. The people have been very nice. I have to be honest, most of the places I've been up to this point has been really good. So I don't have any complaints. I'm trying to think, is there anything else? I don't think there are any other announcements. Oh, let's go to the chat before we leave. Arise for fries. Egypt will be part of the Greater Israel Project, so they will eventually go to war with Ethiopia and Sudan. By the way, Uganda is having elections soon. Are they? Well, fortunately, I have two fantastic guests who can cover Africa that may be able to give us a breakdown on those elections. Super sticker, Mama Thomas. Shout out to Mama Thomas with the super sticker. This is Galt M4XU. Galt or J Galt. I'll just say J Galt. Let's go with just J Galt. Mrs. Kwiatkowski is a lovely guest. If she read some Michael Hudson, she'd know that libertarianism was always opposed to the free markets. Bourgeoisie democracy was how feudal landlords were defeated. I don't think she's giving market theory. Yes, fair enough. Michael Hudson is great given like historical context and everything else. I think she's just giving her take. And look, sometimes takes are reflexive. You know, it's like you look at what the state is doing, and the state is going murdering people around the globe, debasing the currency, etc. But if you remember, I think what is Dutch East Indian Company, that was a company that was doing the same thing as it was getting slaves and transporting those slaves from point A to point B. Whether it's a company, whether it's a government, any organization of power, any Leviathan, even if it's a Leviathan in a sandbox, will use that power to their ends. People should be skeptical of power in general. So I understand where she's coming from when she's saying the state. As for the capitalistic thing, I mean, look, I don't think you can make a distinction between a child and when that child grows up. And what I mean is you may have a company creating widgets and it's a company just in the town, and you may know the owner of that company. And when that company is this kind of small schoolboy capitalism thing, everybody may like that owner. He may be a mover and shaker in the town. But if that owner is able to grow that company, that owner is going to be like any other company in the way that it operates. I need political influence. I'm giving money to this particular candidate to get that political influence. Hey, Venezuela has oil. I can use some chemical, some product that's coming out there and it can cheapen the amount that I'm spending on it. So yeah, I'm going to back this politician who's going for that particular ends. Like there is a drive. It's not like these guys are just operating in a vacuum. There is, there's a reason for why they need to expand into other markets. There's a reason why they need to get their hands on products and so forth. It's not just because they feel like it, if that makes sense. There's an incentive that is built into the way that politicians operate. Some of them are geopolitical. So some is, I want American primacy. I have this hubris to believe that I am the number one factor, and America needs to be supremacy over the globe. And you can look at Europe and see how Europe used to fight each other, where Napoleon, somebody was there before Napoleon. They have these back and forth fights where a country shows dominance, another country shows fealty. At some point, that country loses their dominance and another country gains dominance, and they go back and forth like this for hundreds of years. Problem is we have nukes now. Childhood is over. Childhood is over. Let's keep going. Jigalt. Ludwig von Mies was advisor to the fascist Austrian dictator Engelbert Dollfuss. Libertarianism is reactionary. It opposes free market capitalism. But let's define our terms. What Americans call libertarianism is different than what libertarianism was actually, what it actually was historically. Agreed. But what we call it here is almost synonymous with the whole free market stuff. I mean, granted, they go further. Some of those people are lunatics. And half, maybe 40% as a lefty you'd agree with, especially when they talk about state and state power and the way state power is effectively used, or non-interventionism, those type of things. On the left, we firmly agree with a lot of that stuff. It's the other wacky, kooky stuff that goes into the 30-40%. I don't know how deep into theory she is with that. It sounds like she was given a certain point of view as a reaction to the way state behaves, the way state debases currencies, the way state goes to war, the way state fails in its responsibilities in regards to dealing with the public itself, and instead go looking for foreign wars. I get the sense that that's where she's coming from with that. That's the angle that she's going after it. I hope it makes sense. I don't think she's given political theory in regards to economics. I could be wrong, but I don't think that's what she's trying to do, Jacob. But I appreciate your knowledge on the subject matter. I legitimately do. And Michael Hudson is awesome. I would love for Michael Hudson to come on the show. Just putting it out into the ether. Michael Hudson, if you hear me, I would love for you to join and have a conversation. Hell, him and Richard Wolff can even come on together if they want. Let's see. This is Trash Panda. Trump offers slips in bits of truth through his ramblings. Yes, he does. Usually Trump lies as easily as he breathes. But every random blue moon, he says something that you think to yourself, I can't believe he admitted that. Like to say, hey, we've been murdering Venezuelans. It's pretty astonishing, right? Like that's mind-blowing. It should be mind-blowing. Any rational society, it would be a mind-blowing thing for the president to just come out, yeah, we've been murdering Venezuelans, which is what he's been saying. So there's that. To give obviously lies as reasons for it is also rather mind-blowing. Well, the drugs. And you're just like, seriously? You couldn't come up with a better reason than drugs? I mean, there are obviously other countries. I mean, hell, the CIA was bringing drugs into the country. You're okay with using them as you've announced that you're using them in Venezuela. And then to say, well, I'm also murdering Venezuelans in boats and Trinidad and Tobagans and I forget that, Colombians because of immigration. What? You are justifying murder and overthrow of a country because of immigration? Is that really the argument that you're making? And they stand there and listen to this. And you have to pretend that what he's saying makes some level of sense or is in some context legal. And they just stand there and pretend. It's strange. It's very strange. Like If this was a TV show, nobody would believe it. They'd be like, dude, this is too stupid. That guy's too stupid. There's no way he could be president. But America chose that guy. America chose that guy. What does it say about America, for one? What does it say about the options that America was given, for two? What does it say about the level of anesthetization, if that's a word, that he's murdering random people? And the public just like, oh, well, he's murdering random people. That's amazing. I find all of it to be amazing. I mean, at the very least, it should be amazing. It's just strange. It's very strange. But yeah, he puts in bits of truth. Hey, I'm sending the CIA into the place, into Venezuela. Okay, well, the CIA is supposed to work in the secrets. And you've just shined a spotlight on A, illegal activity. There's that. B, oftentimes the president is not supposed to know. It's the president's men, but there's supposed to be a layer of separation between what the CIA is doing versus what the president knows, because often the CIA is a criminal organization. So there's that. He doesn't care, though. But he doesn't care because in Trump's mind, he's internalized this idea of being a king, of being a hegemon. It's this level of hubris that's built into it. The finesse that many other politicians, even though they may still do the exact same thing, is absent in Trump because he doesn't necessarily feel like he needs to finesse. He thinks being able to effectively murder is a strength. Okay. If a 300-pound man can beat up a 20-year-old or 20-pound man, is it strength? I mean, okay, yeah, you're stronger than the guy who's 100 pounds. That doesn't really say anything about you as a person. It's just you're bigger and stronger. Obviously, the strength fails miserably when he deals with Russia and China. But if you want to go after a country that doesn't have nukes and you want to prey upon them in this way, that's not strength. Sadism, demonic, evil. I hope there's a hell. All of those things. Strength. No, it's pathetic. And he's dumb, which makes it even worse. And like the notion that the press and all of these other people stand around as Trump says stupid stuff and they just kind of nod their heads and write it down. It's amazing. I guess in his mind, I don't care if I'm dumb. I have enough power where you still acknowledge me with some level of respect, which maybe they shouldn't. Maybe they should. And I think this is Zola Rosa. The double standards between Israel and Palestine is crazy. Crazy does not do that word, or does not do what that word is trying to describe, justice. If crazy had the force of a black hole, crazy would work. If crazy had the electromagnetic strength, magnetic strength of a magnetron or as a neutron star, then if crazy would work. Meaning the word in and of itself, used alone, no way can grab the magnify it to the degree necessary to describe the exponential reality of what we're saying. Israel violated the ceasefire agreement on day one. Put it in context, on day one. And people like me, who saw all of these European idiots celebrating, trying to effectively have a release valve in their own populations. People like me looked at that deal and said, we've been here before. Why are you celebrating? Now, there was incentive, almost a public pressure, to try to get people to celebrate because they wanted the mass murder to stop. Meaning the ritualistic murder of children that all of us will watch on a daily basis. They wanted that to stop. And as a human being, you want this ritualistic murder to stop. Effectively watching sadists murder women and children on a massive level. So as a human being, you say, okay, well, I do want that to stop. That's horrible. That's grotesque. Grotesque is not even the right word for it. Again, grotesque as a word in and of itself doesn't have the magnification necessary to describe the exponential reality. But as I told you in the very beginning, I was conflicted. I obviously was aware of that pressure of people to look at it and say, thank God it stopped. But as an honest human being, perched at the edge of the world, we've been here before. We've been here during the Biden administration. We've been here when Trump first took office. And the results are always the same. Israel gets time to reload and rest its military that's fractured at this point. And in the context of doing that, violate the ceasefire whenever they want. And as they violate it, the United States turns around and says, that goddamn Hamas. That's what happens. It happened during the Biden administration. It happened when Trump first got in office. It will happen now. So, it's not cynicism. It's a appraisal of history. Obviously, I would hope I'm wrong in that something can be reached, but something can be reached in what context? An open air ghetto, continuing with this kind of apartheid state where they're murdering people at will, throwing people in prison, and butchering those people when they get into prison. Is that really the context that I want to continue? Yeah, why should I celebrate? Like, obviously, I don't want women and children to continue to be murdered. And if Israel had the capability, they would murder every last one of them, every dog, cat, man, woman, child, old person, etc. But obviously, they don't have the power to do that. And because they don't have the power to do that, especially since it looks impolite by the various people around the globe who, feel some kind of way about genocide, then they're trying to find a different way to deal with the situation. So what they've come up with is a trap. Hey, let's have this loosely fitting deal that we don't have to attend to. And in the context of the loosely fitting deal, we'll violate it remorselessly. And when Hamas respond, we will scream and say Hamas has violated the deal. And the United States will back us in it. Truth, irrelevant. Truth is irrelevant. What you would need in earnest is denazification of the Israelis. That's what you would need. You would need a mass program of denazification for the Israeli population to even start. You would need therapy on a massive fucking level for every last one of those people who've been traumatized remorselessly for the last 70 years, especially for the last 3 or 4. That's what you would need. And that would only be a start. They've destroyed everything in Gaza. There are no functioning hospitals. How do you get medical attention in this situation? The people will starve as they have been starving. There are no trucks that are coming into play. Where are they going to live? All of these things are issues that are not resolved to any degree at all. Hamas has been killing collaborators in the streets, effectively saying this is what happens when you work with the U.S. and work with Israel. It's a mess. I don't feel like this is a success. In one sense, you can say Hamas still exists, which on some level is a success because the objective was to murder each and every last one of them. But that was never an ideal situation. The more misery you put onto a population, the more you're going to embolden that population to resist. So the moment that you kill somebody's mom, dad, imprison somebody's aunt, imprison somebody's whatever, how do you think the family and friends are going to respond? Some in passivity, yes. But most, especially the righteous, will pick up a weapon and will defend, or at the very least, if they can't defend, try to put a bullet in you in a righteous and correct sense. So, no. These European idiots and Trump doing that was a joke. It was a farce. And, the idea that you are paying for genocide, supporting that genocide, and then have this ridiculous ceremony where he is acting as if he's on the campaign trail. And keep in mind, under that is a river of blood. It's disgusting. He's a degenerate psychopath that will bust hell wide open. All of them will. And I don't mean this as just one individual political leader. I'm saying all of these European leaders that have backed this, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, the entire political edifice that has effectively worked, paid for, and backed Israel in this way. And keep in mind, It is even worse for those who are paid to act this way. Israel puts out hundreds of millions of dollars in order to bribe politicians. Not to mention, I would imagine, honeypots looking at Kash Patel, or for that matter, things like the Epstein files. They use that stuff in order to influence our political space. Some of it is influence. Some of it is the United States using Israel purely entirely as a proxy. Our objectives dovetail. And yes, the US will like to say, oh my God, I can't believe what Israel has done. Really? We give them billions of dollars. We give them political cover. We block and support them in the UN Security Council. But the United States is shocked and aghast at what Israel is doing, as if we have no power to do anything about it. This is not the tail wagging the dog. This is the dog wagging the tail. And the most honest thing in the world that Trump said was when he got up there and said, we, in reference to the US and Israel, we. How does that make you feel as an American that the president of the United States that's supposed to work out and look out for US interests can't disambiguate himself from a genocidal monster, a psychopathic state of squatters that have just murdered a huge number of people and is still murdering people as we speak? You should feel some kind of way about that. You should feel some kind of way about that. Zola Rosa, thank you. And Mr. Fantastic. How long could Putin keep going with this approach? Mr. Fantastic, I have no fucking clue. I have no clue. I know that there are some people that don't think there's a political consequence for that. I am not one of them. I do think there's a political consequence in the perspective that you give in dealing with other people. If I'm dealing with somebody that is always an asshole to me, and I'm very amenable to that, okay, well, I look like an asshole. I'm being treated, and I will be looked at in the way that I'm being talked to, and in the way that you are addressing and engaging with me. If I am a child that is talking shit to my parents, and my parents allow that to take place, okay, what does that look like from an external point of view? And what does it mean in the context of the way the parents and the control the parents have over their kids? It matters. There's a reason that China tells the US to fuck off. There's a reason that China, when it's dealing with the US, it goes toe for toe in regards to you do this, I do this. You kick my dog, I'm kicking your cat. You do this, I'm responding. Because what they're showing to the world in experiential terms, which is the only way you can show it, we are peers. We're equals. You are not our master. You do not have power and control. We are the ones that knock, not you. And while it may hurt, almost like being pinched by a crab, we can do without you. Full stop. That is something that they're trying to enshrine almost, from lungs to air. And if China continues to do that, the US will have to acquiesce to that reality because they won't have a choice but to acquiesce. It's not that they want to. It's not that the US is like, oh yeah, we want to deal with China as a peer. It's never that. They're not dealing with anybody as a peer if they don't have to. And the only reason that they will have to is because China will force that reality. China's not being amenable as the US is being assholes. They're getting across that we're equals. I understand that the Russian situation is a little bit different. But Putin takes any and every opportunity to act as if Trump is some kind of partner. Trump is not a partner. When that poll came out where the Russians said that they didn't think the US was one of their main enemies, I don't know what the fuck they're looking at. We are monsters. And until that is ingrained into these countries around the world, they are going to be shocked by the behavior every time. We are monsters. We're psychopaths. We're sociopaths. Our objective is primacy. The very fact that you exist is a problem to us. It's not about the nukes in Iran. It's not about the Ukraine invasion. None of that stuff is what the stuff is really about. It's about primacy, control, geopolitical control, no more, no less. There may be other stuff that's around it in regards to resources and everything else, but all of that stuff at the very least boils down to control. The reason why Trump acts the way he does is because he's trying to project control. He's trying to project, I am in charge, I am a hegemon, I am king of the world, and everybody else is going to bow. And up to this point, many countries have. And yes, while Russia is being amicable in the way that they're in fact engaging him, militarily, they're telling him to fuck off. He has no power in this process. You may see Putin give deference. And an argument can be made that the very fact that you feel you need to give deference is on some level power being exerted. True. I mean, look at what those idiots do in those meetings where they're telling Trump how good he smells. It's like, sir, can I please lick your ass today? Please, please, sir, let me lick your ass. It's the greatest pleasure of my life. And Trump is like, I don't know if I want you to lick my ass today, Patel. Maybe tomorrow. But you let Hegseth lick your ass. Well, yeah. I mean, so I've only had my ass licked once already today. You can do it tomorrow. I'll let you do it tomorrow. Meaning you get those people, radical sycophants. They don't believe the stuff that they're telling Trump. Do you honestly believe J.D. Vance called Trump basically a dictator, called him something like Hitler? And then all of a sudden it's like he's a great man. They don't have to believe it. Trump doesn't need them to believe it. Trump just needs them to say it. Believing it would make it irrelevant. Not believing is the thing that is an exponential power. This person feels he needs to behave this way towards me. His demeanor, his very presence, the things that he says has to be out of the norm. I am compelling that aberration in his behavior. That is me showing power in a physical sense, in a human physical sense. You can make a case that Donald Trump getting Putin to be more deferential is some articulation of power. But keep in mind, Putin is doing this for political reasons. My issue is the way it looks and the way it's going to be translated. And the way it's going to be translated, you need seriousness on some level to be instilled in other sociopaths. When the question comes up, are we going to put troops in Ukraine? Yea or nay? And the answer may entirely depend upon whether or not they think Putin is serious about killing every last one of them, which is what he would need to do. If they think he will not do that, then those troops are going in. Meaning, regardless of what's true in reality-based terms, like whether he would do it or not, is secondary to what they believe. It is the belief that is the issue, and whether or not you've taken behaviors over the course of X amount of months, X amount of years, to instill the fact that you are not fucking around. Being pragmatic is not always pragmatic. Just to be clear, being pragmatic can get you pushed into a corner where the actual response that you take is going to be far more dramatic than it would have been if you would have been more of a hard ass leading up to that point versus Mr. Pragmatic. And I get it. You know, he's the one with looking at everything. He's the one with all of the intelligence reports, the intellectual reports on Donald Trump, the policy meetings and everything else. Fair enough. But there is a logic to it. That if you break your word, basically, you know, the only way people know you're serious is if you hold on to the line that you establish. And if they can cross that line, there may be other lines that you don't want them to cross, that none of us wants them to cross, that they may, if they think you're not being serious. I don't know how long he's going to do this appeasement stuff. And obviously he's been getting pressure in Russia over it because the Russian public hates the way this looks. Trump is running around the globe talking about, yeah, I might hit Russia with weapons. I might hit Russia with missiles. I might do this. I might do that. And Putin is like, yeah, you should have gotten the Nobel Peace Prize. Obviously, this shit looks bad. Mr. Fantastic, these knuckle draggers have no reverse gear. No, it's hubris. How can you back away? You're America. No, I'm being serious on that. How do you back away as America? How do you do that? Like, the media is going to be screaming at you unrealistic things. Your own hubris and ego are not going to allow you to take that step back, which is terrifying, because what that means is that we may sleepwalk ourselves into a nuclear war with troglodytes at the helm, purely out of issues of hubris and geopolitical expansionism, not being able to accept that they failed and cut their losses. So, like I said, I'm not optimistic for the short term. This is not John F. Kennedy, Khrushchev, trying to work out how to avoid some kind of larger conflict. These are pampered, desperate human beings that are hated, even in their own countries. Their societies failing around them, and they're complete vassals to a U.S. government that was led by a man whose brain was mush at one point, and led by another man who's probably the dumbest person that has ever held that office. I'm going to say like, I will say share, I will say subscribe, and I will try to get this signal fixed. You all have a fantastic rest of your day. You be safe and be kind to the degree that you can be kind. Oh, also, you can support PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, Super Stickers, Buy Me a Coffee. All of those things are appreciated. You have my appreciation for all of it that you guys do to keep this channel going. You have my thanks. Yeah, you have my thanks. There's nothing else to really say about that. You make this channel what it is. You're a big part of it. Can't have a channel without you, actually. You all, be safe. Be kind to the degree that you can be kind. I see you in the morning. Have a good one.